What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto infused with the power of Wolverine? If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description to original creator of this beautiful creation. Naruto glanced around the empty clearing once more before reading more. This technique mutates the skeletal structure of the user into metal. The stronger the user's chakra is, the stronger the metal will be. The user will also gain the ability to extend claws from between their knuckles made out the aforementioned metal. Naruto read out loud before blinking and reading over the first paragraph again. What the heck does any of that have to do with a Wolverine? Naruto asked himself. He looked at the next portion of the scroll, seeing more written about the technique. But he noticed the hand seals needed and got distracted as he grinned. Oh yeah. After doing it once I only need one hand seal? Awesome. Naruto shouted before standing and looking down at the scroll. Naruto began to do the first part of the jutsu, channeling as much chakra as he could into his bones. An odd feeling since he had never tried to do it before. 3 minutes later, Naruto held the last seal as he felt his chakra wrap around his insides. Ninja art. Legacy of the Wolverine. Naruto shouted as his chakra pulsed. Naruto's eyes snapped wide at the sudden pain that flowed through him before his mouth opened in a horrific scream filled with the pain of having the molecular structure of his very being change. After only a few seconds, Naruto passed out. Naruto. Naruto groaned as he tried to open his eyes. Iruka-sensei? Naruto thought, seeing a blur of the man who had trained him. Naruto, are you okay? What happened? Iruka asked as he shook Naruto's shoulder, not sure as of why he felt as heavy as iron. Naruto pulled himself up into a sitting position, feeling his muscles move slowly as if he was lifting weights up with him. I don't know. Naruto murmured. Iruka frowned in a mixture between anger and worry. You idiot. Why did you steal the forbidden scroll from the Hokage's office? Iruka shouted, feeling that now that Naruto was conscious, he needed to know what he did was wrong. Naruto took a deep breath through his nose and smelt everything around him in a new way, causing him to be a little distracted from Iruka's question. The what from the where? He asked. Iruka clenched his teeth. Damn it, Naruto, he yelled with his intimidating big head jutsu. Iruka was about to continue yelling at Naruto when he heard a loud laugh from behind him. Well, Iruka, I didn't think you'd find the demon so quickly. Mizuki said as he stepped into view, fully battle ready. Seeing Mizuki, Naruto grinned. Hey Mizuki-sensei. I pass now, right? I get to be a genin just like everyone else? Naruto asked as he stood to his feet with some trouble. Iruka looked back at Naruto with confusion before he turned back to Mizuki, only to be hit with an onslaught of kunai that pushed him back up against the cabin. Naruto shouted in shock. Iruka-sensei. He shouted, running to Iruka's aid. Mizuki's laughter made Naruto look up at him with wide eyes. Sensei, what are you doing? He yelled. Mizuki grinned wickedly. I'm fulfilling my plan, demon. I just used you to get the scroll for me, so now I can kill you and get revenge before going to join up with Orochimaru-sama and the new Sound Village. Mizuki said as he began powering up a throw of his battle shuriken. Now die, demon spawn. He shouted as he pitched the shuriken at Naruto and Iruka. Iruka ripped himself free of the kunai painfully and tackled Naruto out of the way so the two of them rolled across the ground as Mizuki's weapon tore through the cabin wall. Naruto was scared until he realized that he had landed right next to the scroll. Maybe, what's the activation seal? Naruto thought as he sat up and began reading as fast as he could. Iruka stood guard in front of Naruto. Naruto. Get the scroll and run. Mizuki lied to you about passing this way. We can't let Mizuki keep the scroll. Iruka shouted. Mizuki laughed as Naruto ignored the two to keep reading. You're calling me the liar, Iruka? Mizuki asked as Naruto found the way to activate the not-so-subtle part of his technique. Maybe I should tell Naruto about the lies you've been telling him, he said. Iruka's eyes widened as he ripped a kunai from his leg. No, Mizuki. It's forbidden. Iruka yelled as he threw the kunai at Mizuki. The gray-haired shinobi simply sidestepped the attack as he kept talking. You see, Naruto, everyone lied to you about how the fourth Hokage killed the Kyuubi. Do you know why? Mizuki said as he pulled out his second shuriken. Naruto looked up at Mizuki with confusion on his face. What does that have to do with me? Naruto asked. Mizuki smirked. Demon, this is completely relevant. It's the reason I'm going to kill you. Because the fourth Hokage put the fox in you. You are the nine-tailed fox, he said as he spun his shuriken above his head, now die. Naruto was frozen at the news that he was a demon, not just any demon, the one that destroyed Konoha. He thought as Mizuki's shuriken flew towards him. Naruto, get down. Naruto covered his face with his heavy arms. Schlink. After feeling no pain, Naruto looked up to see Iruka crouched over him. Aye, Iruka-sensei? Naruto asked in confusion. Iruka was crouched over Naruto, Mizuki's shuriken buried in his back. Naruto, you're not the demon fox. You're just like me. Iruka said with a sad smile. I'm sorry I lied to you. He said weakly. Naruto shook his head. Then, Mizuki lied? Naruto asked. Iruka was silent. No, not exactly. Iruka said softly, causing tears to swell in Naruto's eyes. In a quick movement, Naruto turned over and ran away, grabbing the scroll as he did so and feeling his muscles pushing as hard as they could to lift his heavy body. Naruto! Iruka yelled as Naruto disappeared into the shrubbery. Mizuki laughed. You see Iruka? He knows he's a demon and now he won't care if I kill him to stop the pain. Mizuki said as he walked past Iruka calmly, ripping his shuriken free of the man's back before kicking his ribs and launching him into the cabin wall. Just rest and die, you can't stop me anyway. Mizuki said before leaping up into a tree to follow after Naruto. Iruka struggled to his feet, and no, I won't let you down Naruto, I won't. Iruka groaned as he crawled to his feet and began running after the two of them. Naruto hid against the top of a large branch as he hugged the scroll to his side. Iruka-sensei, thinks I'm a demon too? Naruto thought as he cried before hearing a commotion down below him. How did you know it was me? Mizuki asked as he dropped his transformation technique which disguised him as Iruka. Iruka smirked as he dropped his own technique, cause I'm not Naruto. Iruka said weakly before falling to a knee. Naruto's eyes widened as Mizuki faded to show he was just a clone as the real Mizuki appeared behind Iruka and kicked him into the trunk of the tree Naruto was hiding in. Where is the demon Iruka? Mizuki shouted as he pulled his shuriken free once more. Iruka chuckled. He's not a demon, he is Naruto Uzumaki. My favorite student and future Hokage. I won't let a traitor like you harm him. Iruka declared as he struggled to get to his knees and failed. Naruto felt more tears come to his eyes at Iruka's words. He believes in me? I'm not a demon, he thought as he cried and his eyes widened. Mizuki had begun to walk towards Iruka as he spun his shuriken. It doesn't matter what you want. Cause you're dead, Mizuki yelled as he charged at the downed Chunin. Moving desperately, Naruto leapt down at Mizuki as he made his chakra move from his wrist up to his knuckles just like the scroll said, causing three bright silver claws to come out from the gaps between his knuckles as he dove at Mizuki. Iruka closed his eyes. Please be safe Naruto. Iruka whispered as he accepted his death. Gah! Mizuki yelled in pain as Naruto fell on him, burying his new weapons into Mizuki's shoulder blades as he landed on his back, his weight crushing the man's ribs. Iruka's eyes widened as Naruto and Mizuki rolled to a stop in front of him, Mizuki flat on his face. Naruto came up on his feet as his claws glistened. You lay one finger on my sensei and I'll kill you. Naruto proclaimed as he drop-kicked Mizuki in the jaw. Mizuki rolled away as if Naruto's kick had the force of a baseball bat, hurtling him into another tree where Mizuki's head slammed into the trunk, knocking him unconscious and ending the fight. Iruka stared at Naruto's claws as Naruto turned to Iruka and grinned. You okay sensei? Naruto asked with a happy grin. The third Hokage sighed in relief as he watched Naruto finish it with his new technique. He's lucky he survived at all. That tripled healing rate of his must have let him endure the pain and the bodily distortion. Now his healing will be almost instantaneous. The third thought as he turned away from the Hokage's orb, stroking his beard in thought with one hand before clicking his fingers with the other. And Anbu dropped into view. Hi Hokage-sama? The Anbu asked. Survival Training Grounds 3, bring your squad. Have Bear take Mizuki to the hospital's prisoner ward and have Naruto and Iruka come straight here once Owl heals Iruka. Oh, and don't forget the scroll. Here is an ordered. Hi Hokage-sama. Poof. The Hokage lit up his pipe as he turned his attention to looking out the window. Even if it was a cheap shot, Naruto did manage to take down a Chunin. And we do have an empty spot to fill in Asuma's team. Hiruzen thought as he stroked his beard. Okay, I'll let Naruto pass. Hiruzen thought with a small smile. A few hours later, Iruka limped into the Hokage's office with a happy smile on his face as Naruto walked in with an apologetic look on his own. The Hokage waved the three Anbu away and off they went after their leader placed the forbidden scroll on the Hokage's desk. "Well, you two had quite an interesting night," the Hokage said with an amused smile. Naruto scratched the back of his head, making the Hokage notice that his hair was less spiky and more smooth. "Hee, yeah," Naruto said, earning a small whack on the back of the head from Iruka. "Naruto, apologize to the Hokage," Iruka ordered. Naruto frowned as he rubbed the sore spot. "Sorry Gigi," Naruto said in a drone. The Hokage chuckled. "No harm Naruto, after all, you managed to catch out a traitor in our ranks. It is I who must thank you," the Hokage said kindly before stroking his beard. "Now I could be really nice and let you join one of the genin teams, or I could. I wanna be a genin," Naruto shouted as he jumped up onto the Hokage's desk. The third Hokage chuckled as he tossed a headband from his drawer over to Iruka. "Iruka, would you make it official?" the Hokage asked as only an academy tester can pass one of his students. Iruka caught the headband with a smile. "I'd be honored Hokage-sama," Iruka said as he stepped up to Naruto, who had dropped down onto the floor once more with a massive grin. "Genin Naruto Uzumaki, I congratulate you on passing. Welcome to the ninja ranks," Iruka said happily as he passed Naruto the headband. Naruto took the headband and put it on as he spoke. "Thanks Iruka-sensei," he said with a wide grin before hugging the man, accidentally pulling open the mostly healed scar on his back. "Ow!" Iruka yelled in pain, causing Naruto to laugh more at Iruka's comedic expression. The third Hokage chuckled before glancing up at the clock on his wall. "Well you two, it's nearly 1 in the morning, I say it's time to turn in for bed," he said as he stood and folded his hands behind his back. "And Naruto, don't go trying to learn forbidden ninjutsu before reading the warnings," the third Hokage said with a soft smile before picking up the forbidden scroll and ushering the two out of his office. Naruto looked up at the third questioningly as the three males walked through the tower. "Warnings?" he asked. The third nodded. "The particular jutsu you did has only ever been completed successfully by Mito Uzumaki since she was also a carrier of the nine-tailed fox," he said, making Naruto flinch. "It's because of the fox that the two of you were able to survive because it knows that if its host dies, then so will it," the third explained. Iruka and Hiruzen got to the stairwell before turning back and seeing Naruto a few steps behind. "So, I really am the demon?" Naruto asked with wide eyes. Iruka gave Hiruzen a worried look, but the third merely smiled again as he pulled the forbidden scroll free from under his arm. "Naruto, what is this I'm holding?" he asked. Naruto's face took on a confused expression. A big scroll," Naruto said. Hiruzen nodded, "and this scroll contains some of the most powerful techniques known to shinobi." "But is this scroll powerful?" Hiruzen asked. Naruto shrugged. Not really. It's just a scroll that has jutsu in it. That doesn't mean it can do the jutsu," he said, still not understanding. Iruka caught on and smiled. "I get it, just because the scroll holds the jutsu it doesn't make it the jutsu. Just like you Naruto, just because you hold back that beast it doesn't mean you are anything like it," Iruka explained, causing Naruto's eyes to widen in realization and understanding. Hiruzen nodded. "Exactly. You are just like any other genin of this village Naruto," he said before tilting his head. "Well, except for the metallic bones and claws," Hiruzen said. Naruto grinned as he held up his hands, letting the claws come out of his skin. "Yeah. I got built-in weapons and armor," Naruto declared with a cheer, accidentally cutting his forearm. "Ouch," he shouted. Iruka stepped forward in worry, but before more than a drop of blood got out, the wound was already scarring and soon was completely healed. Naruto and Iruka stared at the wound for a moment before Hiruzen chuckled. "By the look on your face I assume you didn't read everything about what the jutsu does?" he asked with a smile. Naruto blinked in confusion. "I heal at super speed as well?" Naruto asked. Hiruzen nodded. "Anything else you've noticed?" Hiruzen asked. Naruto frowned in focus before realizing something. "Oh. I can smell everything really well too," he said before taking a deep breath to prove it before running over to the two men and looking over the rail of the stairwell. "And I smell someone right below us," Naruto exclaimed. Iruka was startled that there was someone so close and he didn't realize, But Hiruzen just laughed. That is one of my Anbu guard Naruto. I'm astounded that you could smell her so clearly. Hiruzen said before clicking his fingers, having the Anbu come out into the open. Naruto looked up at the Anbu with a questioning look. Huh, cool. Naruto said before feeling someone rub the top of his head. He looked up to see Hiruzen. Naruto, this is Anbu's snake and she'll take you home now. He said with a smile. Naruto nodded. Okay Gigi. Naruto said, suddenly feeling very tired. Iruka spoke up as Snake put her hand on Naruto's shoulder. Naruto, remember to meet at the academy tomorrow at 10 for your team assignments. Iruka reminded him. Naruto nodded before he felt his chakra system shift. Okay, bye sensei. Bye Gigi. Poof. Sarutobi sighed before turning to Iruka. I plan on having him on Asuma's team. What do you think? The third asked. Iruka blinked, not expecting the Hokage to want his opinion. Asuma Sarutobi? He'll be trained under one of the honored fire temple guards? Iruka asked with wide eyes. The third chuckled. I'll take that as a yes then. He said before the two of them hit the bottom level of the tower and began to walk their separate ways home. Thanks Snake-san, Naruto said as they appeared at his front door. Snake nodded before stiffening and suddenly placing her finger to her mask's lips, causing Naruto to hold his breath as he was caught off guard by the sudden order for silence. Snake softly put her hand to Naruto's door and it swung open with a loud creak, causing Naruto to sigh as he saw his apartment trashed once more. He took a deep breath through his nose and smelled only Snake's fresh scent but about 3 smells that he thought may have been people that were there earlier, but had left already. Snake was suddenly gone for about 5 seconds before his front room light turned on and Snake appeared. Talking for the first time. It's empty, but I don't think you'll be able to sleep here tonight. Snake said to Naruto. Naruto shrugged as he walked past her. It's okay. This happens every other week. That's why I have this. Naruto said, pulling a scroll from underneath the sink in his kitchen. Snake watched as Naruto walked back outside and leapt up onto the roof, unsealing a sleeping bag, bedroll and a pillow. I'll just clean it up tomorrow. He said as Snake watched him lay his stuff out. She frowned underneath her mask, feeling a sudden sadness as she looked at Naruto, hiding his sadness under an emotional mask. We'll leave a clone to watch over you. She said as she made hand seals, causing an earth clone to spring up from the roof itself. Naruto yawned, his tiredness overwhelming him as he got comfortable. You don't, yawn, have to do that Snake-san. He said with heavy eyelids. Snake merely turned and leapt back down to the balcony that connected to Naruto's front door before looking inside the apartment, deciding to clean it up for him while he slept. He's just like me after that man left. Snake thought as she softly closed his door behind her and got to work. Naruto woke with the sun as it hit his face. He opened his eyes and sat up using his stomach muscles, feeling the motion much easier than it was the day before. Huh, I must be getting stronger. He thought before remembering why he was sleeping on his roof, causing him to sigh. Guess I better get to cleaning. He thought before he began sealing everything back into his out-of-home scroll. Hopping back down to his apartment, Naruto's eyes widened as he looked through the open door, seeing the whole house clean as some lady in a long trench coat sat on his couch watching a new TV. She turned to him as he blinked. Hey brat, close the door will ya? She said as she patted the spot next to her on the couch. Naruto blinked in confusion before coming to the one obvious solution. Did you clean my house, miss? He asked. The purple-haired lady nodded. Yep, now come eat this breakfast ramen before it gets cold. I hear ramen is your favorite, right? She asked with a grin. The name's Anko by the way, Anko Mitarashi. Naruto blinked again before taking a deep breath and smelling the ramen filled with crispy bacon and extra egg and slightly less broth. But his nose also picked up Anko's scent. Snake-san? He asked. Anko grinned. Hey, guess that nose really is amazing huh, now come on. She said, once more patting the spot next to her before placing a plastic bag onto a small table which Naruto could have sworn he didn't have before. Naruto, figuring that she was one of his Gigi's Anbu, decided to trust her and so, went and sat next to her before opening the bag, seeing the aforementioned food of the gods before he began eating and watching the TV, having never seen the morning programs before. The two ate in a comfortable silence as they watched the TV, Naruto every now and again stealing glances at Anko as she ate a plate of dango sticks. A minute or so later, Naruto had finished the ramen and folded his legs as he turned to the nearly stranger on the couch next to him. "Excuse me, Anko-san, but why did you get me breakfast? And where'd all this new stuff come from?" he asked curiously. Anko grinned. "Well, since I was moving into the flat below you and I couldn't fit all my stuff, I reckoned that you could have the things that I didn't need since you didn't have half of them yourself." She explained before gesturing over to the corner. "Yeah, and you didn't have stairs either, so I made some," she said, causing Naruto to look over to the corner. His eyes widened at the hole in his floor before he ran over it, seeing a small circular stairwell made almost as if it had grown from the missing floor as well as the wall that led down into Anko's place. "Ah. That's not my flat, lady. I can't just have stairs leading into someone else's flat," he shouted. Anko, for the first time in a while, decided to just be honest with Naruto. "Look, Naruto. I know literally everything there is to know about you after reading your file, and once I made a request to the Hokage that I be stationed as a permanent guard until you become Chunin so that we both know that you will be safe from threats inside the village," Anko said before eating the last piece of dango. Naruto blinked, not quite understanding. "What?" he asked. Anko grinned as she went over to Naruto's bedroom and opened the door, showing that it was now a dining room. "Your bedroom is downstairs where my dining room used to be. Oh, and call me Nei-chan," Anko said with a secretly nervous grin before she stepped past Naruto towards the stairs and sat on the rail, sliding down it in a few seconds to land safely on the first floor of their new living quarters. "Hokage's orders, brat, so come on." After a few seconds of waiting for him, Anko looked back up the stairs. "Naruto?" she asked, worry slightly evident in her voice. Naruto walked down the stairs slowly before stopping on the second last one and looking up at Anko with the slightest hint of tears in his eyes. "Why'd I call you Nate-chan?" he asked softly as if he was about to cry. Anko shrugged, thinking it was a good idea that they get close. "Why not? Maybe we will be as close as family someday," she said with a smile similar to Naruto's fake one. Anko was suddenly knocked on her back as Naruto leapt at her in a tackle hug, forgetting that he weighed more than 3 fully grown civilian men as he cried happily. Anko was torn between the pain of having what felt like a cinder block on her chest and the happiness that came with having someone accept her, so she just hugged Naruto back as she used her chakra to help her sit up with him sitting between her legs. "Hey Naruto, why are ya crying, huh?" she asked as she scratched his head. Unexpectedly, Naruto practically purred like a pet as Anko scratched behind his ear for a moment, causing the two of them to freeze before she began laughing, causing Naruto to grin happily up at her laughter. "It's nothing," he said, wiping his tears of joy away. "Where's my room, Nei-chan?" he asked as he stood before running around Anko's larger apartment. Anko caught her breath from her laughter as she felt warmth inside her, not realizing the emotions that being called sister would bring up in her. But she held herself together as she stood and grabbed Naruto's collar as he ran past her. "This way, Naruto-chan. You get the room directly below your old bedroom," she said as she opened the door near the stairwell, showing Naruto a room which was nearly exactly the same as his old one, which still looked out towards the Hokage mountain. Naruto grinned as he looked around his room before turning back to Anko. "Nei-chan. This is fantastic," he yelled in excitement before running around Anko's flat once more while laughing. Anko sighed. "Well, looks like the Hokage needs me," she said before looking at Naruto. "You remember what you've got to do today?" she asked as she covered herself up. Naruto nodded. "Yeah, the academy at 10 o'clock. Naruto exclaimed as his blush slowly faded. Anko nodded and grinned. "Well then, Naruto-chan, I'll be heading off for work since this should be about my transfer to the T&I department," she said before walking over to one of the other 2 doors on her level, opening it to show her room. "I'll be out in a sec," she said before closing the door behind her. Naruto took the chance to look around Anko's flat, still finding it surreal that he had someone that actually wanted to be called his family. He looked around the kitchen area and noticed that there was a few knives sticking out of the cabinet opposite the fridge. Naruto walked around so that he could see better and raised his brows as he saw a picture of a pale man in a weird yellow outfit with multiple kitchen and kunai knives sticking out of the picture. Naruto tilted his head in thought as he looked at the picture. "Where have I seen this picture before?" Naruto thought before hearing the door to Anko's room open once more. He turned to see Anko in her Anbu attire, holding her mask in her hand as she grinned. "Naruto-chan. Remember that when I wear this mask I'm just Anbu Snake, okay?" she asked. Naruto nodded before realizing that Anko was about to leave as she walked towards the door. "Nei-chan?" he asked as he followed after her. Anko opened the door and turned to him. "Yeah, Naru-chan?" she asked. Naruto felt himself fumbling over his words as he tried not to sound pathetic. Are you gonna, come back?" he asked, worry evident in his voice and words. Anko raised a brow before realizing that Naruto thought she was leaving him already and staying away. "Of course I am. Should be home around sunset tonight." "You wanna get dinner for us?" she asked with a grin. Naruto's grin mirrored her own as he nodded. "Yeah, okay," he proclaimed happily. Anko chuckled slightly as she lifted her mask. "Catch y'all later, Naru-chan. And remember not to be late, y'all hear? Can't have my little brother giving me a bad representative, right?" she said as she put her mask on. Naruto nodded. "No worries, Nei-chan. I won't let you down. Believe it," he shouted happily. Anko felt the mask grip to her chakra, so she let go and used that hand to scratch Naruto behind the ear, causing him to shiver happily. "Good to hear. CYA later," she said before leaping out off the balcony and disappearing in midair. Naruto smiled to himself before closing the door and looking around. A genin and a brother in a single day. I hope this lucky streak keeps going. Naruto thought before realizing he hadn't had a shower since before the genin exams. He looked down on his clothes and his face twisted in disgust as he saw the dried blood of both Mizuki and Iruka on him. "Ew," he said simply before heading upstairs to have a shower in his bathroom. As Naruto opened the door to the bathroom, his jaw dropped as the whole room was seemingly replaced with a large glass tank, which had a large group of baby pythons staring at him. Naruto blinked as the snakes slithered along the fake wildlife to get a closer look at him, so Naruto slowly edged out of the room and closed the door. Staring at the door for a few moments in confusion, Naruto opened the door again and peeked in, once more making eye contact with many slithering snakes. "That's unexpected," he mumbled before closing the door a second time and turning to go back downstairs to use the other bathroom. Finding the room to be a 100% normal bathroom, Naruto stripped down to have a shower when he got a glimpse of himself in the mirror. His eyes widened as he saw all of muscle he had seemingly put on overnight. "I went from fit for a kid to a freakin' gymnast's body," he thought as he looked down at his six-pack and slimline muscles. He looked up at the mirror once more before grinning. "Benefits of carrying around the metal framework, I guess," Naruto muttered to himself before getting in the shower. Naruto took a deep breath as he walked into the academy grounds, smelling the scents of his fellow genin as well as the many others who had walked past. He looked around with a smile as he saw Kiba and Akamaru about to walk through the main door into the academy. Naruto jogged after his friend and entered through the open door to see Kiba talking to Choji. "Hey guys, what's up?" Naruto asked, causing the two to look over at him with wide eyes. "Naruto, what are you doing here?" Choji asked as he took a break from eating. Naruto grinned, gesturing to his headband. "I passed the exams, though I had to do some extra stuff to make up for it, he said happily to the two. Kiba grinned in return. "Yeah. Good work, Naruto," he said, giving Naruto a high five. "How can you guys be so loud so early, huh?" Shikamaru groaned as he walked in behind Naruto, yawning as he finished his sentence. Choji smiled at his best friend. "Hey Shikamaru, I'm guessing your mom forced you to be on time?" he asked before eating again. Shikamaru smirked. "Nah, I'm stuck with responsibilities now. We all are. No matter how troublesome it is, we still gotta do it," he said as he began walking towards their classroom. Naruto was too excited to simply walk. "Race ya there," he said before running, Kiba and Choji following after him. Shikamaru sighed. "Troublesome blonde," he muttered before making his slow walk into a brisk one to hopefully catch up in time. Iruka was standing at the front of the classroom, reading out the teams and those who were in them as he went down the list in his hand. Team 7, Sasuke Uchiha, Ino Yamanaka and Kiba Inuzuka. "You will be led by Kakashi Hitaki," Iruka said. Sasuke's brow twitched before Ino leapt over and tackled him in a hug. "Yay! True love conquers all," Ino shouted. Iruka rolled his eyes before glancing at Kiba, who was smirking in excitement at having a team. Iruka looked back at his list as he read out Team 8, Shino Aburame, Sakura Haruno and Choji Akamichi. "You will be led by Kurenai Yuihi," Iruka said. Shino and Choji nodded to each other, Choji grinning while Shino seemed neutral. which was usually a good thing. The two of them looked over to Sakura to see her glaring at Ino, causing the two of them to become a little worried about their teammates' focus. Iruka looked back down at his clipboard. Team 9 is still in circulation, so Team 10, Shikamaru Nara, Hinata Hyuga and Naruto Uzumaki. Iruka said with a small smile, glancing over at his favorite student, "You will be led by Asuma Sarutobi." Naruto grinned over at Shikamaru, who smirked slightly at being on a team with at least one of his friends. The two of them glanced around for Hinata, only to see the girl sitting quietly as she smiled at her desk, a light blush covering her face. Iruka placed the clipboard down on his desk. "All right, and with that I officially declare that you guys are no longer academy students. Once your sensei comes to get you and talk to you, then I am officially no longer your sensei," he said with a smile as he glanced over the whole class. "It's been a pleasure to teach you all. And if you ever need me, remember that I am here during the school terms and in the mission hall during the off-seasons," he said before holding the ram seal. "So long." Poof. As the smoke from Iruka's shunshin dissipated, the class began to talk to their teammates, and seeing as Shikamaru was sitting in the center row while Naruto was on the left and Hinata was on the right, they met around Shikamaru's seat as Naruto sat on the desk while Hinata took Choji's seat as the Akamichi genin went to sit by Shino. The three were quiet for a moment before Hinata spoke first. "It's a pleasure to work with the two of you," she said quietly, though with no trace of a stutter. Naruto grinned. "You too, Hinata, so does anyone know who this Asuma guy is?" Naruto asked the two of them. Shikamaru nodded. "Yeah, he used to be one of the Fire Temple's guardians. All I know is that he's literally the only active ninja who has wind chakra, and that apparently a big deal," Shikamaru said before the door to the classroom opened and in walked 6 jonin. Some jonin looked around the room and called out their teams, emptying the room slowly. But Naruto was looking for the Fire Temple's sash that would signify their sensei, which he spotted on the goateed man walking up to them. "So," Asuma said as he leant against the table next to Naruto, placing himself in front of Hinata and Shika, "You guys are Team 10. He said as he glanced over the three of them, making them feel slightly nervous at his smirk. "I think you'll do well. Now, follow me," he said as he stood and left the classroom, his team following behind him. After a minute of walking in silence, Asuma opened the door to the back of the academy, walking out to a standalone tree which he calmly sat under, leaning against the trunk as he motioned for the others to copy him. "Come on guys. No need to feel nervous or nothing, I ain't gonna hurt ya," he said as he pulled out a cigarette, lighting it in a simple practiced movement before blowing out the smoke and watching the trio. Naruto broke the silence. "Honestly, I'm not nervous. I'm a little disappointed though," he said with a shrug. Asuma raised a brow. "Disappointed?" he asked. Naruto nodded. "Thought you'd be more flashy since you're so great and stuff," he said with another shrug. Asuma took another drag as he smirked. "Flashy huh? What do you want me to do that would be flashy then?" he asked, obviously amused. Naruto shared a look with Shikamaru and Hinata before shrugging, not having an answer. But Hinata was curious enough to ask, "Maybe, a simple show of your rare wind chakra, Asuma-sensei?" she asked quietly. Asuma nodded. "So, you want to see something basic about wind chakra?" Asuma said as he picked up a stick in his hand. Naruto nodded. "Yeah, definitely," he agreed. Asuma smirked. "Alright, watch this stick," Asuma said as he let him lay flat on his palm, apparently doing nothing of significance. The three genin watched in fascination as nothing happened. Asuma smirked. "Anyone of you see that?" he asked. Shikamaru was the one to respond. "See what?" he asked, not noticing any change in the stick. Naruto was about to ask something when he saw Hinata reach forward, with an awestruck look on her face as her keen eyes noticed the small lines suddenly on the stick. "Amazing," she whispered as she picked up the middle of the stick, leaving the other two pieces on Asuma's hand as it fell into perfect thirds. Shikamaru and Naruto's eyes widened as Asuma chuckled out a cloud of smoke. "Now how about a little introduction? Starting with you, Shikamaru," he said. Shikamaru yawned as he began talking. "I'm not sure what you mean, sensei. Maybe you should go first, yeah?" he mumbled. Asuma chuckled. "Alright, my name is Asuma Sarutobi, as you all know. I like the lifestyle I've been able to maintain since I left the Fire Temple and the little shogi club that meets down at this little cafe on Thursdays." He started as he took another drag of his smoke, Things I dislike are those that threaten the Leafs' way of life, from outside or inside. He said with a pondering look on his face. Hobbies, I guess trying new smokes and cigars, though I'm still inclined towards Winfield Gold as my classic favorite. He said with a smirk as he ashed his cig, and dreams for the future, to watch a team I can proudly call my own grow strong and maybe start a family someday. Asuma said with a kind smile at the three before nodding to Shikamaru, your turn. He said. Shikamaru sighed before talking. Shikamaru Nara, I like relaxing and stuff. I dislike having responsibilities and having to put out too much effort for something not worth my time. Hobbies include cloud watching and mind puzzles. Dream for the future, he said, yawning as he began to talk of his dreams, to live an average life as an average shinobi. I don't need anything more than that, Shikamaru said with a shrug. Asuma nodded and looked to Hinata, who blushed at the attention as the three males looked at her. My name is Hinata Hyuga. I like the forests of our village and someone who has inspired me a lot. She said, forcing herself not to look up at anyone in particular. I dislike the way that my clan is being run. She said strongly, surprising everyone with the forcefulness of her usually quiet voice, and my dream is to abolish the practice of clan separation. She said sternly. Asuma nodded with a smile, a very noble dream. He said before nodding finally to Naruto. Naruto grinned, my name is Naruto Uzumaki. Honestly, I really like the way the past 24 hours have been for me and I'm still stoked about it, haha. He said with a laugh before trying to focus, so, my dislikes are, well, I dunno, I guess the best way to put it is stupidity. I don't like stupid people. And my dream? Naruto said with his grin growing back, to be Hokage. Naruto shouted with excitement. Asuma nodded before looking over the group. Well, this will be interesting. He mumbled to himself as he stood, taking another drag of his smoke at the same time. So what's the plan, sensei? Naruto asked as he followed their sensei's lead. Asuma sighed as he blew out a lungful of smoke. I like you guys, but unfortunately we're not a team just yet. There is still another test of mine that you have to take part in before we're a proper team. He said with an apologetic smile. Another test? Hinata and Naruto exclaimed while Shikamaru sighed. Asuma nodded. Training ground 2, tomorrow at 8 in the morning you are expected to be there. You'll have 3 hours to train and warm up etc. Then I'll be there at 11 to start the test. Be ready as if you were about to go on a mission. You know absolutely nothing about this mission except for the fact that it is for less than 24 hours. Asuma said before taking one last drag and dropping his smoke. Sorry to drop this on you guys. I recommend you spend the rest of the day training together. And to keep it interesting, I'm going to give you one clue about the test. A shinobi's strength isn't how many enemies they can beat, it's how many comrades they can protect. Asuma said as he stomped his smoke before winking at them. Later. Poof. The three sat in silence until Shikamaru stood. Damn, if I fail a test again my mother's gonna kill me. He whined before turning to Hinata and Naruto. Well, since Asuma-sensei is a combat-focused ninja I can only assume that his test will involve fighting. So why don't we go see what combinations we can come up with, okay? He said with a yawn. Hinata and Naruto shared a look before standing by Shika's side. Okay. So where do we start? Hinata asked. Shikamaru glanced at the two of them before sighing. Guess they're gonna keep looking at me for leadership. Well, at least this way we won't die anytime soon. He thought before instantly coming up with a plan. If we train this whole time at the training grounds and get a good feeling for it, then we can spend tomorrow morning warming up and then setting traps for if we have to fight. He said. Naruto grinned as he gave a thumbs up. Sounds like a good plan to me. Naruto agreed before he began walking off. He paused though as he turned back with a sheepish grin on his face. Where is training ground 2? He asked curiously. Shikamaru sighed as Hinata smiled at Naruto. I know, here follow me. She said before running off, Shikamaru and Naruto following after her. This is it, Hinata said softly as she came to a stop at the entrance to a training field. Naruto looked around and grinned. Cool, nice and close to home and Ichiraku's. Naruto exclaimed as he began to walk through the training grounds. Shikamaru yawned as he walked up towards the standard training posts. So, if we're a team we have to know everything about each other, right? That's the best way to learn to trust one another. Shikamaru said as he leant back against the post. Naruto and Hinata nodded. Let's start with our ninja skills? Hinata suggested questioningly. Shikamaru nodded. Sounds good to me. I don't know about you guys, but I always held back in the academy. Way too troublesome to actually put in the effort, he mumbled to himself before looking at Hinata. I assume your father told you to hold back like mine did? Shikamaru asked. Naruto blinked with wide eyes as he looked at Hinata. Yes, he did tell me to do that, but there wasn't much I could hold back, she said, her soft voice trailing off as she looked down. After a few moments of silence, Shikamaru and Hinata both glanced at Naruto. So? What about you, Naruto? Anything we haven't seen yet? Shikamaru asked. Naruto rubbed the back of his head. Maybe you guys should show what techniques you held back first, he suggested. Shikamaru could easily tell that Naruto was nervous about something, but he just couldn't bring himself to care about forcing it out of him. Alright. Shikamaru muttered as he stood tall. As you know, I can do the academy ninjutsu as well as my clan's basic technique, he said as he formed a single hand seal, shadow possession jutsu. Shikamaru's shadow stretched over to Naruto and connected the two of them, forcing Naruto to move the same ways Shikamaru moved, causing the blonde to frown while Shikamaru continued talking. But there is another jutsu that's sort of a combination of this technique and the substitution. It's called. Shikamaru began again as he formed 3 hand seals, shadow portal jutsu. He shouted, causing his shadow to detach from Naruto and change to a darker shade of black. Hinata and Naruto watched as the shadow moved over to a stick on the ground. The moment it touched the shadow of the stick seemed to fall into the shadow only to pop up out of Shikamaru's shadow at a speed which allowed him to easily catch it. Naruto picked his jaw up off the floor. Whoa, you can teleport stuff? Naruto asked. Shikamaru shook his head. Not exactly, but kind of. You see, at the moment I can't do anything too big, like a dog or one of these training posts. The biggest I can go is my school backpack. Shikamaru explained before going back to his lazy position leaning against the post. Since Naruto and Shikamaru looked at her expectantly, Hinata nodded before she began speaking. Well, you both know about the academy jutsu, so I'll show you my bloodline, she said as she held a one-handed ram seal, Byakugan. The veins around her eyes bulged and she could see everything in a 359-degree radius and even through the objects as well. And after explaining that to her teammates, she deactivated her technique as she performed hand seals. Other than that, the only jutsu I know is a pretty basic earth jutsu that my father taught me, earth style. Harden. Hinata proclaimed as her skin began to take on a much darker tone, the brown-gray color crawling up from her feet until her whole body was the same shade while her eyes became a glazed gray instead of their violet-white appearance. Shikamaru nodded. I've heard of that technique. It makes the body's skin take on the same attributes as a stone, though it takes a lot of chakra to start but nearly none to maintain. That's why it's great with a Hyuga clan member, Shikamaru said with mild interest. Naruto raised a brow. Sorry, but what makes it so great with Hinata in comparison to other people? He asked. Hinata smiled patiently at Naruto as her jutsu faded while Shikamaru sighed. Explaining this is such a drag. Look, the Hyuga are primarily taijutsu fighters, and with a technique like that it covers their main weakness, long-distance weapon attacks. Got it? Shika asked. Naruto nodded with a grin. Yeah, that's awesome, Hinata, Naruto exclaimed cheerily. Hinata blushed at the praise as her jutsu completely faded through her feet back onto the ground. Thanks, Naruto. So what about you? She asked. Naruto grinned, feeling much more comfortable about his news after finding out that Hinata's moves change her appearance even more than his own does. Alright. Well, there was a little mix-up when it came to me becoming genin, but even though I still can't do the clone jutsu, but now not only do I heal from any wound near instantly, but I gained something else instead. Naruto exclaimed before pulling his jacket up and over his head and lifting up his shirt. Look, he said, gesturing to his abs. Shikamaru raised a brow, curious as to how Naruto went from an average build to being more built than his own father, an elite jonin, in only a single night, not to mention his apparent new healing factor or that his facial structure seems slightly slimmer as well. Troublesome blonde, what have you done now? Shika thought with a sigh. Hinata, on the other hand, blushed redder than an apple and was focusing all of her energy on not getting dizzy. Naruto then dropped his shirt and held up his fists, and last but not least, Naruto started before sending the chakra through his hands, his claws extending out instantly as the metal shined in the light. My claws. Naruto proclaimed with a swing of his arms, accidentally cutting the training post near him into pieces with no resistance. Naruto and the others stared at the post with wide eyes as it fell into pieces, causing Naruto to scratch his head sheepishly. He, whoops, he chuckled. Shikamaru's eyes focused on the claws intently, seeing very clearly that they were of a different kind of metal than what their kunai were made from. He was quiet for a moment of thought as Naruto retracted the claws, letting Shikamaru see as they moved back into his wrist, that they had aligned between his bones and muscles perfectly. Naruto knelt down to try and fix the post, though he had no idea how. When Shikamaru began talking, "Those came from inside you, Naruto. I'm guessing the reason you're so muscular now is thanks to metal like that spread throughout your entire skeletal structure, right?" Shikamaru asked. Naruto just blinked in confusion. "Skeletal structure?" he asked. Shikamaru sighed as Hinata smiled lightly at Naruto's cute expression. "Your bones, idiot," he thought with a sigh before realizing he would have to put up with this for the entirety of their team placements. This is such a drag. He sighed as he looked up to the sky pleadingly. "Ooh," Naruto said in realization before smiling at his teammates. "So, what do we do now?" Naruto asked. Hinata smiled gently as she stood, stretching her arms above her head. "Why don't we all warm up some?" she asked as she hopped backwards, getting into her clan's stance of the gentle fist. Naruto jumped to his feet excitedly as he took a slightly off version of the Academy Taijutsu style. Shikamaru stood up and sighed, taking less than a second to analyze both of his opponent's styles in a little less than a glance. "Naruto, you need to practice your taijutsu a lot. Hinata, your style focuses purely on defensive or counter maneuvers," Shikamaru said, bored as all he did to take a stance was to shift his legs slightly wider apart. Naruto frowned. "Oh yeah?" he shouted before running at Shikamaru and throwing a haymaker. Shikamaru squatted before spinning on his front foot, tripping Naruto with a sweep kick as he stood calmly, hands in his pockets throughout the whole maneuver. "You're too heavy to use that style anymore, Naruto. Your forward momentum makes it way too hard for you to change course in your attacks," Shikamaru deduced before turning to Hinata. "Attack me," Shikamaru said, this time taking one hand out of his pocket. Hinata frowned as she glanced between Naruto and Shikamaru. "Poor Naruto-kun," she thought as she moved towards Shikamaru. She started with a basic palm strike. Bam! Hinata gasped as she brought her hands to her chest in pain, nearly falling to her knees as she was winded. Shikamaru sighed. "See? If anyone is slightly faster than you, they will land a hit easily. You guys need to improve a lot," Shikamaru said as he shook his hand and flexed his fingers. Feeling a grip on her hand, she looked up and blushed lightly at Naruto holding her. "Hey Shika. What the hell did you hit Hinata so hard for?" Naruto shouted. Shikamaru sighed before holding his hands up in a surrendering pose. "You're right, sorry Hinata. But please tell me you two understand why I did that and what I've shown you," he asked with a raised brow. Naruto frowned while Hinata nodded, standing up with the assistance of Naruto. "Why, you're right Shikamaru-san, I get it," she said with a slight pout. Naruto's frown stayed in place as he glared at Shikamaru, not really understanding what had just happened. Shikamaru smiled softly at Hinata. "Cool, is there anything I can do to help? After all, we're a team," Shikamaru said. Hinata shook her head. "No, that's okay. I think I have an idea," she said as her gaze traveled to Naruto's face. Seeing him still stuck in a frown, she tilted her head in thought before realizing the problem. Oh, he didn't understand what Shikamaru was pointing out to him. She thought before clearing her throat, making Naruto look at her. Seeing that she was in fact all right, Naruto stepped away slightly while frowning still. "So, why did you throw us around, Shika?" Naruto asked. Shikamaru sighed. "Troublesome blonde," he mumbled under his breath. Hinata quickly interjected. "Shikamaru-san just means that I need to be a lot faster for my style and that your fighting style is not really compatible with your body now. He's trying to help us improve," she explained with a soft smile, her blush finally fading. Naruto seemed to drop his negative expression as he blinked widely. "Yeah, well, your style isn't perfect either, Shika," Naruto said with a pout. Shikamaru shrugged. "Yeah, I know, but mom has been drilling me with this style for as long as I can remember, so I hope I'm getting close," he said as he rubbed the back of his neck. Hinata nodded, "As has my father. Those of us from the clans have a very different way of doing things." Hinata said with a slight pout. Naruto looked off to the side, slightly saddened. At least they had a family to teach them. He thought before his mind suddenly flashed to his sister. Maybe Anko-ne can help me somehow. He thought, suddenly emboldened to learn more as he thought of what he could learn from an Anbu member. Shikamaru smirked, thinking the look on Naruto's face was inspired because of him. So, do you two want to spar a little so I can analyze your styles completely? That way I know how we'll fight best together. Shikamaru explained. Hinata blushed, thinking about how much her and Naruto will be touching each other throughout the fight. Oh okay. She said slightly hesitantly before sliding into her stance. Naruto grinned as he got into his stance again. Follow your instincts? Naruto blinked at the phrase that entered his mind, just follow my instincts. Naruto thought as his breath slowed and his stance slid a little lower. Shikamaru's eyes narrowed at Naruto's movement. Something changed. He thought before Naruto charged forward to hit Hinata, doing a wide sweep with his fists. Hinata used her style to dodge his moves easily while stepping into Naruto's guard, moving to hit Naruto's chest. Stop, it's over, Shikamaru said. Hinata and Naruto both paused in confusion as they looked to their third teammate. Eh? They both said in confusion. Shikamaru sighed. If Naruto's claws were out he'd have slashed your face right off Hinata. And if Hinata was using her chakra then your heart would have stopped Naruto. Shikamaru explained. The other two looked at each other and blinked as they realized both their styles were extremely deadly. Shikamaru clapped. Alright, maybe this wasn't the best way to start. He said while scratching the back of his head before clicking his fingers as he came up with an idea. Why don't we just start on what our techniques can do when combined? He suggested. Hinata nodded as she stepped out of her stance. Okay, she said excitedly, liking the idea of working with someone rather than against someone. Naruto nodded with a grin. Sounds good, Shika. He agreed as he let his claws slip free. Stepping into his front door, Naruto placed a plastic bag on the table full of food. Not my favorite, but it was the only place that would serve me those dango things. Naruto thought to himself before going to take a shower, dropping his jacket on the stairwell railing as he walked past it towards his old bathroom. Only to once more enter a short stare-off with a tank of pythons. Naruto blinked. Oh yeah, sorry guys. Naruto said to the large tank as he closed the door once more and headed downstairs to the other one. Walking through the two-story apartment, Naruto accidentally took a glance in Anko's room on his way past it. He paused as he saw her cloak thrown on the floor, must have just left it there. Naruto thought as he was about to leave it. He paused in his step before pivoting back to face her room. Maybe I can try it, he muttered to himself before chucking his towel on the floor of the hallway, and chuckling as he entered her room, picking up her coat and throwing it over his shoulders. Even though it was too big for him, making it slide along the ground and the sleeves dangle further than his arms, that didn't stop him from posing in strength positions in front of her full-size mirror, the great Naruto. Ninja of Steel, Naruto announced before making the sound of hushed applause as he pretended to receive the cheers. Ninja of Steel? That sounds like a weird Superman rip-off. Naruto turned with wide eyes to see Anko casually sitting on her bed in her Anbu attire, her mask sitting on her lap as she used a wet cloth to wipe dried blood off of her arm and neck. Naruto blinked twice before throwing off the coat. Anko-ne. When did you get here? I wasn't touching your stuff, I swear. Naruto shouted in shock. Anko chuckled as she stood using her non-bloody hand to ruffle his hair. Really? 'Cause I got a few of my older ones from back when I was a chunin. They'd probably fit you, you know. She said with a smirk as she picked up her coat from the ground, tossing it over the back of her chair that sat in front of a small study desk. Naruto blinked widely before grinning. Can I try them on? I want one too, Naruto exclaimed excitedly. Anko chuckled to herself as she kicked off her ninja sandals. Go have a shower, Naruto, you reek of sweat. I'll have an outfit ready for ya, she said with a grin as she went over to her cupboard, beginning to pull out an old trunk. Naruto nodded before hugging Anko from behind, knocking her onto all fours as he landed on her back. Thanks, Ne-chan. He shouted happily before running off towards the bathroom, grabbing his towel along the way. Anko shook her head at Naruto's antics as he left, though the moment she heard the bathroom door close, she sighed. This is gonna take some getting used to. She mumbled as she stood once more. Anko opened the old trunk, smiling lightly at all her old chunin and genin stuff she kept there, including her first trench coat, It ain't snakeskin like all my good ones, but it does have the extra storage space. She thought as she shook it out, holding it up to her torso as she did so. She glanced at the mirror before smirking. Hey, probably should start saving for one of these again. She muttered to herself as she realized just how small the coat would be on her now. She tossed it over the back of her chair with her newest cloak before looking back in the trunk, frowning as she caught sight of a picture of her Genin team, all of whom were no longer a part of her life, the asshole that cursed me, the asshole that left me, and the asshole who died for me. She thought with a saddened expression as her hand ran along the Sharingan eyes of the only person she considered a friend from her old team, White Ya Date Ya Moron. She thought to herself before turning her head away from the picture, a single tear building its way over her eyelids. She dropped the picture back into the trunk as she reached inside it again, grabbing an old bag that she pulled free. She stretched it a little, seeing that it popped back into position easily enough. This should fit him well considering I got it before my girls developed. She muttered as she remembered her annoyance at suddenly developing ass at a younger age than most would consider normal. Chucking the shirt over with the jacket, she frowned as she looked at the only 2 pairs of pants she'd have worn at the time. Well, those aren't gonna come close to fitting him properly, she said as she looked over what was obviously women's Anbu tights. She shrugged, not really dwelling too much on the no pants thing. She suddenly paused as she smelt food. Dango, she exclaimed before grabbing Naruto's stuff and heading after the smell. Getting to the bottom of the stairs, Anko grinned as she smelt the food from up in the kitchen. Oh yeah, she exclaimed before chucking Naruto's clothes on the handrail and running upstairs for food. Would I think? Anko looked over the back of the couch she was lying on and grinned. You look ready for a mission, that's for sure, she said before seeing his pants and frowning. Don't ya have pants that are a little less target? Why? She asked. Naruto pouted as he looked down at himself. The mesh armor shirt fit snugly, showing off his muscles underneath the shirt easily while giving extra protection from the standard shuriken and kunai. The leather cloak was a dark black unlike Anko's, and it seemed to fit him almost perfectly as he had flicked the collar up, buttoning it together with only the top button so that it flared out from his mid-chest downwards. His pants were the same bright orange as before, though at least 3/4 of the bright color was blocked from view thanks to the new leather coat. Naruto looked up at Anko, pout still in place on his face. But my favorite color is orange, Naruto said. Anko raised a brow before sighing. Come here, Naruto-chan, she said as she sat up properly, giving him room to sit on the couch as she shimmied over. Naruto took a seat next to her as she began talking. Do you know what color is my favorite? She asked. Naruto shrugged. Purple? He asked, wondering about her hair. Anko shook her head. Nope, gold, she said with a smile. Naruto frowned further. How was I supposed to know that? You're not wearing any gold stuff, Naruto said. Anko nodded. That's because gold shines brightly, and as a ninja, I don't want to be noticed. Get it? She lectured. Naruto tilted his head in thought as he nodded. Yeah, I get it, so I gotta get stuff that'll help me with my ninja life first, yeah? He guessed. Anko nodded again with a grin. Exactly. Do all your favorite stuff and eat your favorite things and wear your favorite clothes around the village all you want. But when you're on a mission, I want you in combat attire, got it? She asked, ordered. Naruto nodded before reaching over to the small coffee table and grabbing a skewer of beef and veggies. But these are the only clothes I'm allowed to buy, Naruto said with a fake smile. Anko scoffed. Who told ya that? Anyone can buy whatever they want, just gotta find the right store, she said, knowing for a fact that while many civilian stores turn away those with connections to a dark past or limit their range, ninja stores will sell to anyone with a Konoha headband. Naruto looked up at Anko, his fake smile dropping. Huh? But all the stores I've been to have said that I can only get stuff like this, Naruto said in confusion. Anko shrugged as she glanced out the window. Seeing that there was still some light peeking the horizon, she grinned as she hopped to her feet. Keep them clothes on and grab your wallet. I'll be back in a sec, she said as she leapt over the couch and blurred downstairs at Jonin speed. Naruto watched her disappear with wide eyes before he hopped to his feet as well, moving over to his orange jacket that was still hanging on the stair rail. After a minute of fumbling with it, Naruto pulled out his froggy wallet and his hidden kunai, almost forgot about them. Naruto thought as he took them out of the secret loops, trying to find a place on his cloak to hide them. Hey, what time is your test starting? Anko asked as she reached the top of the stairs, pulling her cloak on over her mesh shirt, though she still wore her Anbu pants and shin guards. Naruto smiled up at her. 8 I think. Naruto said. Anko nodded. Awesome, leave those knives here and I'll show you where they can go tomorrow morning, Anko said as she walked to the door, opening it and looking back at Naruto expectantly. Come on, let's get going. Naruto nodded as he followed her out the door. So, where exactly are we going? He asked as the door closed behind them. Good evening, welcome to Shinobi Tools. We have everything we've imagined in stock and will gladly custom make anything you imagine. A 20-something-year-old man said in a bored drone from his place behind the counter. Anko frowned. Hey ya dumbass, where's the old hag? Anko asked. The guy behind the counter looked up from his magazine with a bored look on his face at Anko before sighing. What do you want, Anko? He asked. Anko chuckled as she put her hand on Naruto's shoulder, pushing him ahead of her so that the guy could see him. Naruto-chan here needs a ninja makeover. No price limit, just make it happen, she said with a grin. Naruto looked up at Anko with wide eyes. Eh? I do so have a price limit, Naruto exclaimed. Zoom, but it was too late. Wow, no restrictions? I'm gonna have fun, an older lady shouted happily as she blurred around Naruto. The genin was stunned silent by the old lady that had swiftly appeared from the back room. With the quick glances he managed to get of her as she blurred around him, he was pretty sure that she was taking his measurements before she blurred back behind the counter and into the back room. Naruto stood on an odd angle as he blinked in confusion. What's going on? Naruto asked. Fighting style? Naruto jolted as he turned away from a smirking Anko to see the old lady sticking her head out from around the corner. Hey lady, up close taijutsu, he uses claws kinda like the Inuzuka, Anko said calmly, cutting off Naruto's words. Naruto looked up at Anko. But Nei-chan, I don't really have a chakra element? Naruto looked back and forth between Anko and the reappearing head in major confusion as Anko shrugged. Dunno, leave it as a blank, Anko replied. Focus? Anko shrugged, her smirk still in place at Naruto's bewilderment. Close combat, tracking and assassination type. Naruto looked up at Anko again. I'm not that good at track. Done. Naruto finally got to see the woman standing still as she came to a stop in front of Naruto, holding out a bunch of what appeared to be clothes before she dropped them on the ground in front of Naruto. Naruto blinked with wide eyes at the old lady who stood in front of him. She barely seemed able to stand, let alone sprint around in a blur like that. Naruto said, staring in major confusion between her and the clothes. Anko nodded. Grab your stuff, Naruto. How much is it? Anko asked. The lady merely stood with a weird smile on her face as the guy behind the counter sighed. Bring it over here, I'll rack it up for ya, he said as he slid his magazine to the side. Naruto began picking up as much of the clothing as he could hold, placing it on the counter piece by piece while the lady watched him. Naruto began to get nervous and leaned over the counter to talk to the guy quietly. Hey, why is she looking at me like that? Naruto asked. The guy merely sighed. She's waiting for you to discover your chakra element so that she can modify your clothes some more to make them suit you, he droned on as he continued scanning. Naruto nodded slowly for a moment before looking at the guy again. What's a chakra element? Naruto asked. The guy paused as he scanned one of the last items, looking at Naruto with an annoyed expression. What do I look like, your teacher? He said in return before continuing with his work. Naruto pouted and seemed to give up, not quite understanding what was going on until Anko leaned against the counter next to him, causing the blonde to look up at her. Nei-chan, how much will this cost? He asked, knowing for certain that he wouldn't have enough. Anko shrugged but smiled. Don't worry, this stuff will be perfect for you at this point and you'll be able to afford it, she said to Naruto before looking at the guy behind the counter. Right, Eri? She asked. Eri looked up and nodded as he scanned the last item. We'll do what we do for most people. As long as you paid 10% of the price now, we'll just take a fraction of your mission wages until it's paid off. With a week full of D ranks you should be just over halfway when it comes to paying, he explained before grabbing one of the codes. Naruto smiled and took the offered code, seeing that it looked almost exactly like the one he was currently wearing, though now it had a large dark orange tinged X across the back. That's awesome. I'll take it then, Naruto exclaimed happily. Anko chuckled at Naruto's exuberance while pulling her cloak open slightly. Poof. Naruto watched as Anko swung the longest part of her cloak over the 5 plastic bags filled with clothes. He stood amazed as the bags disappeared in a small burst of smoke. "Whoa, Nei-chan, how'd you do that?" Naruto asked. Eri sighed. "Find out later, kid. The same seals are in your coat, so she would have copied those same seals into the new clothes. Ya just have to learn to activate them at the right time and in the correct way." He explained in the same drone as he went back to his magazine. Naruto grinned, pulling out his frog wallet happily. "So how much do I owe ya, Eri-san?" he asked excitedly. "What do ya think?" Naruto asked with a twirl as he reappeared from the staircase. Anko looked over her shoulder from her breakfast of eggs on toast, smirking at Naruto as he posed in a combat stance. He stood in his new near black cloak, the dark orange X on his back being the only real color on it. It stayed closed by a few small pieces of string that stretched around the collar of the cloak, ensuring that the top half of his torso was covered while the rest of the cloak flowed outwards. Underneath the cloak, Anko could see a darkened mesh shirt that was basically a better fitting version of the one she gave him, though this new shirt had elastic on the lower hem, causing it to be tighter on his stomach. Naruto's pants were the same near black as his cloak, tight like Anbu pants except for the very bottom which flared outwards as if it had been ripped to be shorter. His shoes were making him somewhat uncomfortable since he had never worn shoes with their design before. His toes wiggled in the barefoot shoes, showing their dexterity and flexibility to be top-notch while they still protected his feet. Anko grinned. "Now y'all look like a ninja kid. Did you practice that trick with the seal?" Anko asked. Naruto nodded and grinned as he lifted his arm with a flowing movement, causing a kunai to slip from his sleeve into his hand unnoticeably before he showed it to Anko. "Got it, Nei-chan," Naruto exclaimed as he pulled his wrist back, bringing the kunai back to be pressing against the storage seal inside his sleeve. Anko stood up with a smile. "Looks good to me, Naruto. And the emergency seal?" she asked. Naruto grinned and gave her a thumbs up. "All ready, Nei-chan," Naruto exclaimed. Anko smiled again as she picked up the last bit of toast. "Awesome, you're gonna do well, Naruto-chan, I can tell," she promised before taking the last bite. She used one hand to grab her own cloak from the back of her chair while the other was ruffling Naruto's hair. "Eat up good and I'll see ya this afternoon, yeah? I should be home first, so I'll do is some dinner," she said. Naruto nodded as he grabbed his 2 pieces of toast and began to make a sandwich out of his meal. "Got it, Nei-chan," Naruto said as he placed the 2 halves of his sandwich together. Anko chuckled at Naruto's exuberance as she moved over and opened the upstairs door. "Now come on, we both have things to do," she said, the morning sun streaming in through the open doorway. Naruto nodded as he took his first bite of the egg and bacon sandwich, walking out the door quickly and waiting for Anko to lock up. Naruto caught Anko off guard with a hug as she turned from locking the door, finding herself being thrown to the ground due to Naruto's weight. Naruto finished his hug and jumped to his feet. "Catch ya later, Nei-chan," Naruto said before turning and running off. Anko sighed as she heard the floorboards creak under Naruto's weight. "Later, Naruto," she shouted to him as she shook her head. "He's such a heavy kid now, there's gotta be a way to use it or else it could be used to his disadvantage," she thought as she stood and dusted off her clothes. A few seconds later, Anko was roof-hopping in one direction as Naruto sprinted down the road in the opposite, ready to start a new day. "Morning, guys," Shikamaru mumbled with a yawn as he strolled onto the training grounds. Naruto looked over and waved as he entered from the other side of the training field while Hinata shared a polite smile from her place sitting atop the center training post. Unseen by the 3 of them, Asuma stood hidden in one of the high-up branches as he formed a few hand seals. "This is my test. Nowhere near as hard as Kakashi's, but it will push them far, I think," he thought as his genjutsu took effect. Naruto laughed at something Hinata said before he caught the scent of someone he was somewhat familiar with. "I know that scent, come on, think," Naruto thought as he looked around, trying to see who it was so that he could try to memorize the smell so that he could put a face to it at any time. Naruto turned again as Shikamaru suddenly noticed his silence. "What is it, Naruto?" Shikamaru asked as he followed Naruto's gaze. Stepping out of the tree line from just upwind, was a Cloud Village Anbu. Hearing a worried gasp, Naruto and Shikamaru turned to Hinata to see another Anbu holding her up in the air, a hand around her throat. Finally, an unsealed Byakugan user, the Anbu said in a deep voice. Naruto bared his teeth in anger. "Hey, Put her down, asshole! Naruto shouted as he leapt forward towards the Anbu and Hinata. Shikamaru span back towards the first ninja as he formed a hand seal. Either the first was a distraction, meaning this will disable it, or we have to be against 2 Anbu. 2 Anbu would be impossible, but if I catch this guy then maybe 2-on-1 would be able to catch this other guy off guard. He reasoned in the few seconds it took for his chakra to form. Shadow Possession Jutsu. The first Anbu paused as Shikamaru's shadow latched onto him, only for Shikamaru to smirk. Hey, so it was a fake. He thought as his shadow retracted, the clone dissipating as his chakra pierced it. Shikamaru shouted in pain as Naruto slammed into him from behind, the two of them sprawling before Naruto rolled onto his hands and knees. Drop her now. Naruto nearly growled. Shikamaru got into the attacking stance of the Nara clan, Cloud Ninja. Maybe. Shikamaru thought before he stood tall. Naruto, stop. Naruto paused as he glared at the Anbu, who was now holding Hinata still against his chest. Smart kid. You should listen to your friend Blondie. I need this Hyuga for the Cloud Village. The Anbu said as he moved to run away. Hold on a sec, Shikamaru said. She's not a Hyuga. Shikamaru said calmly with a shrug. The Anbu paused for a moment, glancing down at the top of Hinata's head, not being able to see her eyes from the angle. Huh? Yes, she is. She has the Byakugan. The Anbu said surely. Naruto's stance lowered as the muscles in his legs coiled. He had no thoughts other than to save his friend. But whatever Shikamaru was doing was making the guy stop hurting Hinata, so he stayed still as he prepared to attack. Shikamaru sighed. I'm sorry, Mist Ninja, but you're mistaken. Look at her eyes. Shikamaru as he took a step forward so that he was facing the man side on, pointing at Hinata with his front-facing hand. Naruto glanced at Shikamaru in confusion about his lies, but his eyes widened as Shikamaru's free hand had stealthfully pulled out a few shuriken, causing Naruto to look at their opponent again as cognitive thought came back to him. The moment this guy lowers his guard, that's when we'll strike. Naruto thought as he felt his heartbeat in his ears. Hinata gasped for air as she looked ahead at her new teammates, tears in her eyes as she was reliving the trauma of her kidnapping a few years prior. The Anbu sighed as he brought his attention to Hinata, but she closed her eyes as she began thrashing in his grip. Hold still, will ya? The Anbu said as he tried to grab Hinata's chin so that he could see her pupils. Shikamaru shifted his weight. Now Naruto. Shikamaru shouted as he threw the shuriken. The Anbu looked up at Shikamaru, realizing the shuriken were heading on a path for his face, causing him to duck low behind Hinata in a dodge as Hinata closed her eyes again. Hinata opened her eyes and dropped to her knees, revealing Naruto to the Anbu as the genin was mid-lunge with his claws out. But the Anbu was at least Jonin level, and rolled backwards to give himself a second of time before leaping forward, landing a fist to Naruto's head. Crunch. OW fuck. The Anbu shouted in pain, having hurt his fist against Naruto's metal skull. Naruto held his head in slight pain as he dropped into a wider stance, his claws shining brightly as he stood protectively in front of Hinata. You'll never touch my teammates. I'd sooner die than let Hinata be harmed. Naruto roared. Shikamaru smirked at Naruto's words while the same words seemed to make Hinata snap out of her fear-induced shock. He's right. I can't let one of my teammates fight alone. Hinata thought as she quickly formed a hand seal, Byakugan. That got the Anbu's attention, causing him to smirk as he brought out a kunai. Now there's my proof. The Anbu said with a laugh as he sprinted forward. At the speed he was going, he was barely a blur to Naruto and Hinata as he appeared between them, kicking Naruto back a meter before he turned, thrusting the kunai forward before he suddenly froze a few centimeters from Hinata's face. Shadow Possession success, Shikamaru said calmly, his shadow having connected to Hinata's so that the moment the Anbu came near again, he'd be captured. Now you too. Shikamaru proclaimed. Hinata and Naruto nodded as they lined up to attack, Hinata from the front and Naruto from behind. Gentle step. Palm heel strike. Hinata shouted as she leapt forward, her hand gently tapping the Anbu's chest. Claw lunge. Naruto shouted as he leapt forward with a front flip, cutting off the Anbu's arms at the shoulder in a simple move as he soared over his head, landing behind Hinata with a smirk. Poof! The smirk fell as Hinata, Shikamaru and Naruto stared on confusion as their enemy disappeared in a cloud of smoke. causing the three of them to turn and come to a stop back to back as three more Anbu appeared. He had to use the escape seal against these kids? One of the Anbu said casually. The tallest of the group stepped out, shouldering a massive blade as he pointed at Hinata. You three, give us the girl or we'll kill you all. He said menacingly. Naruto bared his teeth. Touch her and you die. Naruto growled. Shikamaru smirked, dropping his battle stance with a sigh. This is too troublesome. They know our movesets now and we've proven that we'll protect one another. Can you stop the test now, Asuma-sensei? Shikamaru asked. Naruto and Hinata turned to Shikamaru with wide eyes as hidden behind his high-level genjutsu. Asuma smirked. So he figured it out, but let's see how far his conviction goes. Asuma thought. The leader of the Anbu glanced around defensively as if looking for this supposed. Asuma-sensei, Right kid, the Anbu said with a shrug, causing the other Anbu to laugh and for Shikamaru's eyes to narrow as he began to doubt his own analytical deduction. Now step aside, he said as he threw a handful of kunai in a blur. Shikamaru and Hinata went to dodge, while Naruto leapt forward. Schlink. Everyone paused as Naruto coughed up a mouthful of blood, the multiple kunai sticking from his torso making everyone stare at him in shock. Damn. Naruto said before falling to his side. Hinata's Byakugan eyes widened as she was about to scream, but before her very eyes the wounds healed as Naruto got back up to his feet. You won't, he began as he ripped the last one from his chest, the others falling to the ground as his wounds healed. Touch my friends. Naruto shouted as he ran forward. Kai. The whole world shimmered around them, showing Asuma to be standing in the place of one of the other Anbu as they all faded from existence. Okay, let's call it a day. Asuma said with an eye smile. Shikamaru sighed in relief as Naruto and Hinata paused in shock. Asuma-sensei? Hinata asked, suddenly seeing the levels of genjutsu unravel around them with her special eyes. Asuma nodded as he walked forward. You all passed my test, do you want to know why? Asuma asked. Naruto's anger began to peak again, though at least his claws had retracted as he ran at Asuma. You bastard. Why'd you almost kill us? Naruto asked. Asuma openly laughed at that, completely dissipating the serious atmosphere and Naruto to pause in his run. Don't you see something about where you're standing? There was no real danger. Asuma said. Naruto looked back to see that up until the Anbu faded. The three were in the same spot they were standing when Naruto first picked up Asuma's scent, causing Naruto's eyes to widen before he face-palmed. Oh damn. I had a clue before and I completely forgot it. Naruto exclaimed. Shikamaru smirked. Hey, if you were able to pick up on his presence, give us a shout next time, yeah? Your nose may be able to tell when anyone gets near, but Hinata's Byakugan will be the tool we use to analyze the enemy before they arrive. Shikamaru said calmly. Naruto nodded to Shikamaru with a smile before his gaze traveled to Hinata, who seemed to be on the verge of crying. Hinata? Naruto asked. And then she fell to her knees, her tears pouring from her eyes as the shock wore off. Naruto's eyes widened as he ran over to her and pulled her into a comforting hug, looking up to Shikamaru for an answer since that was where they all seemed to be coming from. But instead, Asuma spoke as he approached them again. There is only two worries that I have for this team, and we'll address the first one right now. Asuma said as he knelt in front of Hinata. All of the details pertaining to your kidnapping has to become common knowledge for this team, Hinata, because as we all just saw, just seeing a cloud ninja is enough for you to freeze up for at least a full minute. More than enough time to kill you. Asuma said with a no-nonsense tone in his voice. Shikamaru cut in. I addressed that as I'm sure you noticed, Asuma-sensei. Shikamaru said, causing the Jonin to look up at him as Naruto just decided to hold Hinata as she cried. I called you out as a mist ninja in that fight and you didn't flinch because all you were focusing on was this test and that you had to hold your technique. Even if she didn't realize that was the moment she began to regain control over her fear. I think she needs an actual professional to look at her rather than a theorizing combat Jonin, Shikamaru said calmly before seeing Asuma frowning at him. Not that I'm saying you're not good enough or something, it's just that, well, there are people who specialize in things like this and Hinata only deserves the very best. Shikamaru said with a smirk. It doesn't matter, Naruto said with a blank expression. I'll take the damage, she won't be killed. Neither will Shikamaru. Naruto said, only now realizing that he should have died from the weapons that hit him and pierced his lungs and stomach. At those words Asuma frowned again, and thus comes problem number 2. Naruto, I don't quite understand how you survived, let alone how you were healed in less than 10 seconds, but you'll die if you jump into danger like that. Asuma said seriously. Naruto looked Asuma dead in the eyes as he stood, dead? Naruto asked as his claws came out. The group gasped as Naruto crossed his arms and stabbed his own lungs. I can feel it, Naruto thought as he felt his own body healing around the steel. It hurts, but I've felt worse. I can take this, Naruto thought calmly, letting only a twitch show on his face at the pain of being skewered. After acknowledging that the pain doesn't matter, it's easy to ignore without the fear creeping in. Naruto thought as he pulled his claws back out. Asuma's eyes widened as he stepped forward to help Naruto, but watched with wide eyes as the wounds healed. Naruto. How? He asked in shock. Naruto looked up at Asuma before glancing around the team, realizing that this moment was key in their development as a unit, so he decided to tell the truth. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. I am a Jinchuriki. You know what that means? Naruto asked. Asuma stared at Naruto, completely stumped that he actually knew about his condition, but it was Shikamaru that nodded. It means, the power of human sacrifice. It's a term used to classify those who have had a demon inside of them. Shikamaru said with a straight expression. Hinata's eyes widened to that of Asuma's as she looked at Naruto. But, what? She asked. Naruto spoke again before anyone could finish, his mind reeling as he felt something change inside him. Not something physical, but his will, his aim in the world. Naruto held his arms to his side with a shrug. I am a sacrifice for the better of the village, and my nindo is to live up to the fourth sacrifice, Naruto said as he gestured to his chest with his thumb. I hold the 9 tails and I control its power now, no more useless destruction and loss of life if I have anything to say about it. Naruto swore unblinkingly as he kept eye contact with Asuma. Asuma blinked before sighing and smiling. Geez, that's awkward, Asuma said as he gestured to himself with his thumb just like Naruto did. That's almost the exact same thing I said to my sensei, but I was talking about my dad, not the fourth. Naruto blinked as Asuma's smile grew. My nindo is to protect every single person in this village. As long as the next generation grows happily and healthily, I'll be happy. Asuma said as he pulled up a sleeve, showing a gash down his arm. I think we'll get along fine, Naruto, he said before tilting his head in consideration, though. I think you may need to learn some more control over yourself. Asuma said seriously before looking to his other students. Hinata was still staring at Naruto as tears formed in her eyes. The Kyuubi? She stuttered out. Naruto's gaze turned to Hinata, his eyes softening as he saw the fear in hers. Hinata. Naruto said as he stepped towards her. Hinata stepped back as the sunlight bounced off his bloody claws, shivering in fear for a moment and causing Naruto to stop his approach and retract it into his fist. Naruto, it doesn't matter that you're a Jinchuriki. Asuma and Naruto turned to Shikamaru as he placed a hand on Hinata's shoulder, causing her to turn to her side and look at the Nara as he smiled at Naruto casually. I've known for about 3 years now, Naruto, and well, he said with a shrug. Though I do believe a demon could play dumb, I don't think they can play that dumb. Shikamaru said with a chuckle. Naruto's brow twitched as he pointed at Shikamaru. Hey, I'm not dumb. Just cause I wasn't in the top 10 like you. Top 5, Shikamaru said with a smirk. Naruto growled animalistically before Asuma placed a hand on his head. Sorry Naruto, but what you just did kinda proves Shikamaru right, and besides, the way I hear it you were the dead last of your class. He said with a joking smile. Naruto's face faltered before turning back to Asuma, completely forgetting about Hinata's fear as she watched the two talk in confusion. I don't understand. Naruto-kun. She thought with a tilt of her head as Naruto pouted up at Asuma and yelled back, causing Asuma to laugh. But demons are evil, aren't they? She thought. Demons are forces of nature, Hinata. Beings that can manipulate the earth itself with their massive volumes of power. Shikamaru began, causing Hinata to look at him again as he frowned at her. I, though a comrade of mine, would be able to see difference between a being like that and the boy that's protecting us all from its destructive presence. Shikamaru said before walking over to Naruto and Asuma. Hinata blinked as tears formed in her eyes as a sudden memory occurred to her of the bullies at the playground that would hurt Naruto and call him a monster and a freak. Is this why? Did the older boys and girls know? She thought as she looked at Naruto and how normal he was. Asuma looked over to her, raising an arm in a wave as he smiled to her. "Hinata, come over here, you're part of the team too," Asuma said kindly. Hinata nodded as she swallowed nervously and jogged over. As she got close, she noticed Shikamaru nod to Naruto while Naruto was looking down again, trying to hide his face from hers. It hurt to see him so sad after seeing the happiness that was on his face a few minutes earlier, so she hugged him. Naruto jolted as Hinata hugged him from the side. "Hinata?" he asked in shock. Hinata smiled up at Naruto before shaking her head as she stepped back. "Sorry about before. I was just, shocked," she mumbled nervously. Naruto blinked at her before grinning as he scratched the back of his head. "Hee, no worries, Hinata-chan," Naruto said happily. Shikamaru stepped up to the two of them and placed a hand on each of their shoulders. "Hey, you two, Asuma-sensei wants us," Shikamaru said with a nod to their sensei as the bearded man walked away from the group. Naruto and Hinata nodded before following after Shikamaru, jogging after Asuma for a few moments as he stepped out of the bushes on the other side and stopping. The trio stepped next to Asuma as he gestured to the small monument in front of them. "This is the memorial stone, guys," Asuma said as he held his hands in a prayer position. "Those who have fallen in the name of protecting the will of fire have had their names carved into this stone, and someday I hope to be on it too," Asuma said with a smile on his face. Naruto and the others looked up at Asuma in shock as Shikamaru asked, "You want to die?" he asked. Asuma finished his prayer and turned to his team with a serious expression. "The statistics are that 1 in 3 ninja will die on the job. If I am the one, then that means that 2 others who aren't prepared to fall yet will be able to move on and protect the next generation until someone can replace me and inherit my will of fire," Asuma said before looking over the 3 members of his team, seeing the unrest and shock in Shikamaru and Hinata's eyes. But as he looked at Naruto, he saw a calm smile. Naruto nodded. "Well, since there's 3 of us, I choose to be the one who will pass on my will of fire too. Besides, it'll take way longer to kill me than it will to kill my friends," Naruto said calmly. Shikamaru and Hinata stared at him in shock while Asuma couldn't help but feel a sense of kinship with Naruto's beliefs. "Naruto, you're not gonna die," Shikamaru proclaimed, though he couldn't think of something else to follow up with. Naruto shrugged calmly. "I may sacrifice already, this is the natural flow, Shikamaru," Naruto said before clapping his hands in prayer and bowing to the memorial stone. The group was quiet as Naruto finished his prayer and looked up again, his eyes spotting one name on the stone out of the many, Mito Uzumaki. Naruto thought, smiling as he recognized the name not just as the first Hokage's wife, but as another strong Uzumaki who carried the same burdens he did. That didn't stop her from living a full life. I won't let it stop me from spending mine doing what's right, Naruto thought before turning back to his team. Shikamaru and Hinata offered a quick prayer as well before turning to chase after Naruto and Asuma as the 2 men had kept on the move. As the 4 of them came to a stop back at their training grounds, Asuma turned to his team with a kind smile. "Alright. Meet up here tomorrow at 8. I'm gonna explain the first lesson, then we'll take a D-rank mission while you think on that lesson. Then once the mission ends we'll do the practical side of the lesson," Asuma said with pause as he pulled out another cigarette. "We're gonna continue like this for the first 10 lessons before we swap to body conditioning in the mornings and then 2 D-ranks missions a day. Once we have you guys above 30 D-ranks, then I'll consider getting something higher." Asuma finished as he lit his smoke with his silver lighter. "Got it?" "Got it, sensei," Naruto said with a thumbs up. Hinata nodded with a smile, excited to start her growth as a ninja. Shikamaru on the other hand groaned. "More lessons? Oh man, what a drag," Shikamaru said, causing the other 3 to laugh at his lack of enthusiasm. Naruto panted as he fell onto his butt. "Thanks for the training," he said between deep breaths before clearing his throat. "Anko ne." Anko smiled at Naruto, the morning sun beginning to rise behind her and casting the rooftop they were standing on to be lit up a bit brighter. "No worries, Naru-chan, but get back up and do it one more time," she said with a grin. Naruto groaned. "But you said that last time," Naruto said as he stood. Anko's grin didn't budge. "I know I did. But you always have to prepare to keep pushing forward, Naruto. Now once more, and that's actually it for the morning," she said calmly, not even slightly tired even though Naruto was getting pretty worn out. Naruto nodded as he shook out his limbs and rolled his shoulder, readying his chakra to run over certain parts of his skin and into the seals stitched into the clothes. "Ready," Naruto said calmly as his eyes calmed. Anko nodded as she revealed 5 shuriken and tossed them above her in the air. Naruto span quickly, the movement hiding the fact that he had just unsealed 3 shuriken and a kunai. Naruto tossed the shuriken and hit 3 for 3 before tossing his kunai. He took out 1 more shuriken from the air as its shadow moved over the final shuriken, revealing 1 more shuriken hiding in its shadow that knocked the last one of Anko's from the air. Naruto smiled as Anko grinned. Good, now not only do you have the shadow shuriken technique, but you can do it from a quick launch like me. Anko said happily as she began picking up the shuriken. Naruto nodded and grinned himself as he looked down his sleeve, seeing that the stitched-in seal was in no way changed or damaged. Thanks, Anko ne. Naruto wheezed out as he fell on his back. Naruto paused as he heard someone land on the rooftop, but since Anko was smiling in that direction, he figured it was someone she knew. Oh yeah, food time. Anko said happily as she sat next to Naruto. Naruto rolled onto his stomach and looked up, seeing another Anko placing a tray down between the two of them. Naruto sat up and grinned. Ichiraku ramen? Awesome! Naruto exclaimed in excitement. Anko smiled as she sat down next to Naruto, grabbing her chicken ramen as Naruto began to scarf down his own food. Yeah, she said as the shadow clone disappeared in a puff of smoke, and the two there say hi by the way. She finished. Naruto smiled as he finished a mouthful of the noodles. I haven't seen them in a while, can we go eat dinner there sometime? Naruto asked. Anko shrugged as she had her own mouthful, covering her full mouth as she spoke. Yeah, why not? Naruto smiled again and slurped the last of his bowl down at a remarkable speed. Can I go have the first shower, Anko ne? Naruto asked with a smile. Anko nodded and gestured to the rest of the rubbish from their food delivery and his leftover bowl. Go ahead, but take the trash with ya, she said as she turned and flopped her legs over the side of the roof, watching the people walk by below her. I'm just gonna rest here for a while, Anko said before yawning. Naruto nodded as he stood, scooping up the rubbish in his arms. See ya soon, Naruto said before jogging over to the gap in the ledge, hopping down to the rundown walkway to enter through the front door to the top floor. And now for our first day as a team, Naruto thought excitedly as he rushed to get ready for the day ahead. Tree climbing? It was Hinata's turn to sigh for once as opposed to Shikamaru. It's one of the most basic chakra control exercises. You two really haven't heard of it? She asked her teammates. It was 8:30 in the morning when the group of 3 had finished their 50 laps of varying running types around the field. Sprinting, high knees, back kicks and the worst one for all of them, handstand laps. Though luckily the handstand lap only had to be done once since it was still their first week. This was when Asuma had them start their stretches as he explained the first skill he was going to teach them. Asuma blew out the smoke from his lungs as he leaned calmly against the center training post. Yep, tree climbing. But here's the plot twist, no hand allowed, Asuma said with a smirk at Naruto and Shikamaru's confused expressions. Naruto nodded. I'll use my claws, he exclaimed as he slid his claws out. Shikamaru sighed. Then it wouldn't be a chakra control exercise, idiot, Shikamaru said before stepping forward. So, how do we do this then? And how will it help with our chakra control? Shikamaru asked Asuma. Asuma smirked before waving them over to him, the 3 of them surrounding him as he sat down and put his feet about halfway up the training post. What we're gonna be doing is channeling chakra to the soles of our feet, like so, Asuma said as he focused his chakra, causing his feet to lift off the slightest bit from the tree. Now since all of our weight is on the ground, you can calmly regulate just how much chakra a body of your size will need to create the right chakra platform for you. As you can see, mine are off the post now, that's because I'm using too much chakra, Asuma explained. Hinata confidently went to the post next to Asuma, taking a seat next to it as she put her feet on the training post, forming a ram seal to concentrate her chakra before she suddenly stood horizontally. If you do just the right amount your feet stick, but not enough and you'll fall too. Asuma nodded at Hinata's explanation and stood up from the ground. Now while Hinata's in the middle, I want all of you to have a single turn at this. Just remember 3 things. Your chakra coming out from the soles of your feet with an even spread, your chakra level maintaining and varying as you walk, and finally the perfect amount of chakra for you, Asuma said with a smile. The kids nodded as Shikamaru and Naruto moved to the posts, readying their chakra as they lay on their backs and placed the bottom of their feet to the posts. After a few seconds of silence, Shikamaru opened his eyes. Ready, sensei? He said calmly, theorizing that even if he overshot it, that meant he knew that it would take even less effort than he thought. Naruto held his seal for a few moments longer than Shikamaru as he formed a random amount of chakra, estimating that however close he was, he could just add more until he had gotten the right amount. Ready! Naruto exclaimed. Hinata turned on her post so that she was walking horizontally around it, her Byakugan active and showing her their chakra. Shikamaru is close, but still needs work, she thought before focusing on Naruto, her eyes widening at the massive amounts of chakra he had in just 1 foot, let alone the both of them. She opened her mouth to warn him, but it was too late. Whereas Shikamaru merely couldn't grip the log when he tried to stand horizontally, sliding back down without any show that he was even close, Naruto had only just placed his feet on the log after channeling the chakra. Thoom. Asuma reached out after Naruto as the boy shot from the clearing with a shout, causing the three left there to stand in silence as they saw a plume of water splash up through the air about 20 meters past the clearing, causing Asuma to sigh in relief as he heard the sudden sputtering and complaining from Naruto as he stormed back to the clearing. A sopping wet Naruto marched into the clearing with a frown. What the heck was that? Naruto exclaimed loudly. Shikamaru smirked in amusement as Hinata giggled at the cute expression on Naruto's face. Meanwhile, Asuma was shaking his head in disbelief. That was enough chakra for the beginner's version of the burning ash technique, he thought as he took a drag of his smoke. This thought made Asuma look up in realization. I know it's early for elemental manipulation, but if I find out what they're aligned to, then I can at least plan for the future and in Hinata's case, give her some actual training to do. I wonder what they'll get. Asuma thought before looking around the group as Hinata explained Naruto's overuse of chakra to the two of them. Well, I guess I can ask for our first D rank to be in the Shinobi district, that way I can pick some elemental chakra paper. Asuma thought before turning back to the group. Attention, Asuma said loudly. The three genin jumped in shock at his shouted before Shikamaru stepped forward to Asuma, just waiting patiently as Naruto and Hinata got the idea and did the same. Asuma smirked. Alright you three, I want you to keep thinking about this technique today as we do our first D-rank mission together, though I'll be there to watch over you guys, it's actually up to you, got it? Asuma said. Naruto nodded with a grin as Hinata nodded nervously, though Shikamaru just sighed. So, what do we have to do? Shikamaru asked. Asuma opened the double doors on the first floor of the Hokage Tower. This is the mission hall. From here you collect a mission, and once the matter is resolved, you fill out a report and return it here, gaining your mission pay relevant to how the mission went. Until you guys do your first A rank, that's how the process is always gonna be. Asuma explained as he led the three over to the only empty line. Naruto glanced around curiously as they approached the desk with a large purple print of the letter D on the sign above it. Where do you guys think the others are? Shouldn't they be here too? Naruto asked. Shikamaru shrugged. I guess they were here earlier? Or maybe we're the early ones? Shikamaru theorized. Hinata stood on her toes as she began to walk slightly faster, making Naruto and Shikamaru refocus on the task at hand as they all arrived at Asuma's side at the mission desk, the Jonin smiling at the Chunin sitting there. Hey Kotetsu, thought you'd be on the gates today? Asuma asked. Kotetsu looked up, the guy smirking as he took his hands back from the 10 scrolls spread across the table. Nah. Since Izumo is still recovering from that bodyguard mission, I'm being assigned single tasks until he's better. Someone else is covering it, he said with a sigh. Gotta admit, I miss the radiant sunrises through those gates. He said, smirking at the memory before gesturing to the scrolls for Asuma. Asuma stepped aside and gestured to the genin. Actually, they need the full introduction. Asuma said. Kotetsu leaned with a smile. Oh, you guys are the first of the new graduates, congrats. He said kindly before gesturing them forward, letting the three step up to the desk in front of Asuma. Two of the genin smiled while the third just sighed again, so Asuma spoke up. Is there any of the beginning missions in the Shinobi district? Something that'll get us near Higarashi's? Asuma asked. Kotetsu laughed. Yeah, perfect. This mission is to collect the discarded metal scraps from the three major ninja tool sellers in the district and deliver them to Higarashi's forge, the last privately owned forge in the village. Kotetsu said, gesturing to the second from the right. It's also the highest paying of the lot today. Kotetsu said with a grin to the kids, estimated time 4 hours. He finished. The kids looked at each other smiling before looking up at their sensei, getting a nod in return for their look. Shikamaru nodded, "We'll take it." Hinata's Byakugan eyes led the way as they walked down the main road, turning left around a corner store as she pointed to the large building on the next corner. "That's it there, Higarashi's weapons," she reported. Asuma nodded, glad that they had found the place easily. "Alright then, for this mission I want the three of you to choose on a captain for the team. This time through they'll do the talking and planning. For every D rank, that's how I want it done, guys. So go ahead," Asuma said with a smile as he considered pulling out a smoke, but decided against it as Naruto pointed at Shikamaru. Shikamaru raised a brow as Naruto grinned. "You should be the troop leader," Naruto said. Shikamaru frowned as he looked to Hinata, seeing her nodding silently in agreement, before sighing, "What a drag," he muttered as he began walking ahead, holding out his hand to Hinata. "Give me the scroll and get out some paper or something. We have to get the name of the other stores so we can go get the stuff," he said as he left. Asuma waited outside as his genin team went in. "I'll let them handle this part by themselves," he thought as he stopped at the door, letting it close in front of him. Asuma glanced through the glass window as Shikamaru showed the mission scroll to the guy at the counter. "Good, straight to business," he thought as he glanced behind the counter to the shelves. "Yep, and they still sell the chakra paper here," he thought before his mind trailed off, seeing a shelf of weapons exactly like his own. "Well damn, if they become standard then my technique won't be as surprising," he thought with a frown before stepping out of their potential view. Asuma waited a few minutes before the trio walked out, pausing as he addressed them. "So, what did you find out?" Asuma asked. Shikamaru smirked. "We have to go to 3 of the other ninja tool shops and bring their trash here," he began explaining as he held his hand out to Hinata. Hinata finished writing on her notepad and tore the sheet out to give it to Shikamaru. "Specialist ninja garb. 2 blocks down the eastern road," Shikamaru said. Hinata gave Naruto his notepad and he blinked before looking across the road. Right there. Yin-yang shinobi wear," Naruto said. Hinata held up her notepad to Asuma, "And mine is just 1 block south," Hinata said. Naruto frowned before he interjected. "Hey Shika, why don't we swap?" he offered. Shikamaru raised a brow at Naruto. "Why's that?" "Not that I mind, less work for me," Shikamaru said. Naruto smiled. "Well, I can carry it all. Trust me, I know I can," Naruto said. Shikamaru raised a brow. "In one go?" "Well, I guess if you say so," he said before swapping notes with Naruto. The 3 looked up at Asuma as the man just nodded. "If you guys think that's good enough then go ahead," Asuma said with a smile. The trio looked at each other and nodded. Hinata and Naruto in determination and Shikamaru with a defeated expression before the trio split up. Asuma watched them all leave with a chuckle. "These guys are way more goal-driven than I was as a kid," he mumbled as he pulled out a smoke and lit up, "though I think Shikamaru just thinks putting up with the effort is less effort than dealing with Naruto's complaining," he thought as he exhaled the smoke, walking into the shop to buy some elemental chakra paper before the kids got back. Next, Shikamaru stepped up in line and gestured towards his headband tied around his bicep. "Hey, I'm the ninja sent to pick up your metal scraps," Shikamaru said in a bored tone. The man behind the counter nodded. "Oh hey," he said before turning to face the back. "Yo boss. The delivery guy is here," the man said loudly. An older man stepped out from the back and nodded to Shikamaru. "Follow me out the back, the trolleys are there," he said. Shikamaru just nodded as he followed along. Hinata opened the door to the quiet shop. Hello?" she asked softly, her voice echoing around the apparently empty room. Hearing the sound of a muffled voice, she walked through the shop until she walked past what looked like a stack of fallen books. "MMPH. Hinata blinked before forming a ram seal. "Byakugan," she announced, looking through the pile to see what was making the noise and where everybody was. Her eyes widened as she ran over to the books. "Oh no. Are you okay? Hello?" she asked over and over again as she pulled books out of the pile, soon digging out a hand and a head, and then the rest of the person came out with a sigh of relief. "Yeah, I'm fine now, thanks," the young man said excitedly as he jumped to his feet, shaking Hinata's hand fiercely. Hinata blinked at the odd man who suddenly ran around the counter into the back room. Hinata stood in silence for a moment as she once again used her Byakugan to watch the odd man through the wall behind the bookshelf. Excuse me?" Boom. Hinata jumped back as the man pushed out a large trolley with a tarp in it, filled to the brim with scraps and small shards of metal. Yep. This is it for the little things. Can you come back for the large stuff in the next trolley? I'll have it ready in a few minutes, the guy said as he ran back around to the back of the shop. Hinata just blinked for a moment as she stared after the disappearing man, shrugging before turning and beginning to push the trolley towards the door. Well, nearly halfway there, she thought as she left the store. Hey, are you sure, kid? The man said, his wife staring at the blonde over his shoulder. Naruto nodded as he was walking on all fours. 8 trolleys chained together before the chain was wrapped up around his torso. Yeah. This is great training, Naruto said as he went to crawl forward, trying as best he could. The couple blinked as Naruto barely managed to roll the trolleys a few inches before they came to a stop. Even on flat ground this'd be hard. I don't think that kid can do it up this hill in one go, the woman said, even though it was only a slight incline. Naruto's ear twitched, having heard the quiet comment before he gritted his teeth in determination. Come on, he growled out as his claws came out. People gasped as Naruto hooked his claws into the ground and began to steadily pull himself along, grinning in victory as he was on his way, his muscles screaming in resistance even though nothing was slowing him down. Asuma nodded as Shikamaru stepped out the shop's front door for the second time. Finished, sensei? Can I just wait with you? Shikamaru asked hopefully, looking like the 10 minutes of effort on his part was too much. Asuma chuckled at Shikamaru before nodding as he saw Hinata arrive with the first trolley. Got the first one, she said as she went to push it to the front door. Asuma stopped her. If this mission had to be done at maximum efficiency, what could you do right now to make it more likely to finish sooner? He asked her. Hinata blinked up at her sensei for a moment of silence before her gaze drifted to Shikamaru. Shikamaru-kun, could you please take this inside for me while I go grab the second one? She asked softly. Shikamaru sighed before nodding. Yeah, sure, I guess, he mumbled before getting to work again. Asuma chuckled as Shikamaru went inside with the trolley and Hinata jogged off. Good. Now the only one left to worry about is Naruto, Asuma thought as he had another smoke. A few minutes later, Shikamaru came back out of the shop with a heavy sigh. Done. Now I don't have to. Oh man, what a drag, Shikamaru said, his shoulders slouching as he looked past Asuma. The Jonin turned and couldn't help the chuckle that came out as he saw Naruto crawling along the road, dragging a ridiculous amount of weight behind him in the form of metal-filled trolleys. How ya goin', Naruto? Asuma asked. The blonde grinned as he stabbed his claw into the ground, crawling forward another step as he spoke. Pretty good, sensei, Naruto managed to say between pulls before dropping onto his face in front of the door. Shikamaru sighed as he looked over Naruto and the trolleys, but he glanced inside and noticed that the area they were supposed to wheel them all around to was not only empty, but covered in the shadows. Shikamaru smirked as he begun forming hand seals. Ninja art, shadow portal jutsu, he exclaimed. Asuma blinked as Shikamaru's chakra fluctuated and the first trolley dropped into its own shadow. Interesting, a small-scale transport technique, Asuma thought as he watched Shikamaru to the next couple of trolleys. Naruto grinned as he watched the trolleys disappear one by one. He started undoing the chain that connected him to the trolleys from around his chest as he looked up, noticing Hinata coming around the corner with her second trolley. Hinata-chan, he exclaimed before he ran off. Shikamaru sighed as he was left to transport the last 3 trolleys inside with his jutsu, glancing over to Asuma once he finished. Are we done now? Can I go home? He asked with a yawn. Asuma chuckled out a cloud of smoke. Not yet, Shikamaru, but I'll tell ya what, you can go on lunch break early. At midday I want you back at the training field, and if you're late, I'll tell your father, Asuma threatened, hoping that the threat of a clan head looking over his shoulder would motivate him. Shikamaru smirked. Thanks sensei, Shikamaru said before sitting down where he was and closing his eyes. Asuma blinked at Shikamaru before taking another drag of his smoke, glancing over to Naruto and Hinata as Naruto continued pushing the trolley in front of him, Hinata standing at its front to steer it since Naruto couldn't see. After all, only she could see through solid objects. As they arrived, Hinata pouted. This one won't fit through the door, she muttered, noticing a single thick piece of metal sticking up taller than the rest. Naruto nodded, thinking that was her way of asking him to do something about the problem. Got it, Naruto said as he simply pulled the one tall piece out and carried it overhead. Hinata smiled at Asuma and Shikamaru before pushing the trolley the rest of the way through into the shop. Naruto following along with his random big chunk of metal. Asuma nodded to himself as the two of them went to finish the last of the mission. Once they come out, I'll tell them about the completion signature. Asuma thought as he decided to stand tall, stretching out his back for a moment as it cracked and popped. Asuma glanced through the glass of the shop again, noticing Naruto was no longer visible and Hinata was talking to the woman in the shop over the counter, causing Asuma to smirk as he saw Hinata holding the mission scroll out to the woman. Huh. Looks like at least Hinata knows what to do. Asuma thought before seeing Naruto come around from behind the shop, the large blacksmith being the one to lead out the blonde boy while laughing in the background, causing Asuma to smile softly at their interaction. Well, now we'll go get our payment. Whoa, this is great, Naruto exclaimed with a grin as he counted out the notes in the envelope given to him from Asuma. Asuma chuckled as Hinata and Shikamaru smiled at Naruto's loud announcement. That's only a D-rank's pay, Naruto, $30 isn't that much. Shikamaru said as he pocketed his own envelope. Naruto grinned at him. It is to me. And if this is what we get for a D rank? Naruto said before looking up at Asuma. How much do we get for an A- rank? Naruto asked. Asuma chuckled. Well, we won't be going on any A ranks soon, but you do bring up a good point. Asuma began as he led his team down the road towards the training grounds. D ranks are minimal cost, about $20 to $50 depending on the mission. And C ranks are usually above the 50 mark but can stretch to be way more depending on the mission's timeframe. The higher ranking missions have their own variables which may or may not affect costs and things of the like, he said before lifting his cig to his lips. Hinata glanced up at that moment. So, sensei? What are we doing now? She asked. Asuma smiled. Remember this morning with the chakra exercise? Well, I hope you listened before and thought on it cause we're learning it this afternoon, he said with a chuckle, and you're not going home till ya do get it. Shikamaru and Naruto paled slightly at that, though Hinata sighed in relief. Anyo. What about me then? I already know the training, she said, hoping she wasn't being too boastful. Asuma smirked at that moment. Yes, I know, I have something a little more advanced for you to begin on today, he said smugly as if he knew some big secret. Damn it, Naruto shouted as he fell from high in the air, flipping at the last minute to land heavily on his feet, cracks appearing in the ground beneath him as he growled up at the tree in front of him. Why can't I get this? He shouted angrily before punching the ground. Naruto, calm down, Asuma said, you can't keep letting your emotions rule you like this. Look at me, Asuma ordered. Naruto was still growling at the ground for a moment before closing his eyes and taking a deep breath. Sorry, sensei. This is just really frustrating, Naruto said with a scowl before looking up at Asuma. Asuma smiled softly to Naruto, letting him know it was alright. I want you to look at Shikamaru over there, Asuma said. Naruto turned to look at the Nara boy as he practiced his recently learned tree climbing technique, standing horizontally out from a tree as he watched the sky above. See how he's relaxed? He is probably the smartest out of you all because of the fact that he can keep a cool head throughout almost any situation. And Hinata got this good from her years of training the skill in the Hyuga clan, Asuma said with a smile to Naruto. You know how long it took me to learn this when I first started? He asked Naruto. The blonde shrugged, still watching Shikamaru's calm stance. A few hours? I mean, we've been at this for 4 hours now and I can barely make it past halfway, Naruto said with a frown. Asuma chuckled. It took my brother just over 6 hours. I thought that was amazing since I only managed to get it after 2 days of training, Asuma said, causing Naruto's eyes to widen as he turned to his sensei. It's not easy to do, Naruto. You're actually making incredible progress, Asuma said encouragingly. Naruto beamed at the praise. Really? Thanks, sensei, Naruto exclaimed with a smile, turning towards the tree again as he cracked his knuckles. I got this, he said before running forward. Asuma smirked at Naruto's predictable behavior. Just give him a dash of motivation and he'll accomplish anything, he said before seeing Shikamaru and frowning as the boy had once again stopped to sleep on a branch. Shikamaru. Back to work, Asuma shouted across the clearing. Do you really want your father to know how much you're slacking off? He asked. Shikamaru didn't seem to react at all, causing Asuma to frown. Sensei? Asuma glanced to his side to see Hinata blushing slightly as she watched Shikamaru. Shikamaru-kun has an inherent fear of his mother for some reason, and she said as if embarrassed to be talking about her teammate's personal life. His father is supposedly lazier than him. She said before turning and jogging back to her little patch of ground and picking up her leaf again. Asuma raised a brow at that little tidbit of information before turning to Shikamaru and once more shouting across the training field, "Fine, if you're that confident I won't be able to contact your father, I'll just tell your mother," he said. Noticing Shikamaru's back stiffen at the words, "She works at the Nara's herb house, right?" he asked rhetorically. Asuma blinked as suddenly Shikamaru was back to work at twice the pace as before, running up and down the tree in a near blur, forcing the Jonin to stifle a chuckle. Their team dynamic is a bit off, but with Hinata's skill, Shikamaru's mind and Naruto's raw power, I doubt any of the other teams would stand a chance against them at this point in time. "Alright, that's it for the day, guys," Asuma said with a clap, getting their attention while he stomped out his cigarette. "Last revision back on the logs, come on," he said as he walked over to the training posts, coming to a stop next to it while his genin came over to him. Naruto and Hinata came to a stop at Asuma's sides after jogging over, though they all had to wait a few moments before Shikamaru lazily walked over. "So just like this morning?" Naruto asked curiously, staring at the log in front of him in determination. Asuma nodded as he stepped back, watching the kids all lie on their back before putting their feet to the posts. Hinata stood instantly and walked the few small steps that was available up the post before she walked around it horizontally. "Perfect, Hinata," Asuma said, provoking a small blush from the girl. Asuma turned his attention to Shikamaru and Naruto, seeing the two of them walking slowly around the post just as well as Hinata, though Naruto's facial expression made it rather obvious that he still had to actually focus some of his attention to the task at this stage. "Shikamaru, Naruto, I can gladly say that you both have learned this skill in a single afternoon, and I reckon if you guys are to try to use this skill in everyday life, then it'll become second nature to you as well," he said with a nod of approval. Seeing that his job was done, Shikamaru disconnected his chakra, letting himself land heavily on his back and honestly not caring. "So what's the last thing then, sensei?" he said with a glance to Asuma's hip. The Jonin smirked. "So, you noticed I have something?" he asked. Shikamaru nodded while Hinata and Naruto got down from their own posts, turning to face Asuma as the man conversed with Shikamaru. "Yeah. Ever since you had us split up for the mission you've been double-checking your pouch and looking at Hinata. Obviously you were wondering if she should start on this new training earlier since she was done ahead of us," Shikamaru said. Asuma smirked. "Very astute, Shikamaru. But you missed the part where I actually did have Hinata go ahead with the training," he began before his eyes trailed to Hinata. Knowing that while the Hyuga girl could speak for herself, she needed a confidence boost. "Hinata, why don't you explain it?" Asuma asked as he held out something from his pouch. Hinata blushed before nodding as she took the sheets of paper from her sensei. "Okay, she began, turning to Shikamaru and Naruto as she bit her lip in thought. "This is elemental chakra paper, and it's made from a tree inside the compound of the fire temple thanks to a specific breed of trees," she said, blushing as Naruto and Shikamaru seemed intent on her and her words. "So, you just channel your chakra into a piece and it'll react in a way to signify your elemental affinity," she said as she held up a single piece of the paper and channeled her chakra into it, making the paper wet as the very edge of it crumbled to dust. "I have water nature chakra and a slight affinity towards earth that's natural in most Hyugas. The earth part at least," she said with a forced smile as if having water chakra was actually a fault. "Cool," Naruto exclaimed with a grin. "So you can learn water stuff like what sensei showed us with his wind stuff, right?" he shouted excitedly at the idea of throwing cool water jutsu here and there. Way flashier than invisible wind chakra. Seriously, what's the point of having an awesome technique if no one could see it? How lame is wind chakra? Naruto was pulled from his thought as Hinata offered the other two pieces to her teammates. "So all you have to do is channel your chakra," she said in conclusion to the two of them, trailing off as she looked up at Asuma. The Jonin nodded to her, causing her to smile at the silent praise, something she was far from used to. Shikamaru sighed as he channeled his chakra into it. "It'll probably come out with shadows or something," he thought before the paper took effect. Shikamaru raised a brow as the paper ignited in fire. "Huh? I'm a fire type?" he asked rhetorically. The three others turned to him as Asuma smirked. I'm guessing you were expecting shadows after seeing how Hinata's paper was affected by her bloodline. He asked, earning a frown and a nod in return. That's one of the key differences in your clans. While those of the Hyuga have a Kekkei Genkei which is in their blood, the Nara's skills with shadows are actually a secret technique that can be taught to anyone once they know how to use pure yin chakra, which has only ever been closely done by the pure yang chakra that the Akamichi can utilize to change their physical shape. Asuma explained. Naruto blinked in confusion as Shikamaru nodded. Interesting. Maybe this can work to my advantage. He mumbled to himself before going back to looking up at the sky. Asuma smirked at Shikamaru's words, but he was quickly distracted by Naruto's shout. What the? Mine broke, Naruto exclaimed as he watched half of his piece of paper fall to the ground. Hinata and Shikamaru raised a brow while Asuma's eyes widened. Naruto, what happened? He asked as he stepped closer to Naruto. The blonde frowned up at Asuma. I channeled my chakra but the paper just fell in half. It didn't get wet like Hinata's or flamey like Shika's. Naruto whined, making Shikamaru frown slightly at the nickname he thought he had kicked back at the academy. Asuma quickly took out a spare piece of the paper and held it out to Naruto. Here, do it again. Asuma said with a hopeful smile. Naruto raised a brow at Asuma's behavior as he took the paper. He channeled his chakra and frowned as it fell in half again. He looked up at Asuma and blinked at the weird grin on Asuma's face. Sensei? Naruto asked with a fearful look on his face. It had been exactly 3 weeks since then. Though Asuma was a usually unmotivated person, discovering that Naruto had wind chakra seemed to kick his need to teach into hyperdrive. But the man knew that showing favoritism wouldn't go down well with 2 clan heirs on his team, so he upped the ante for all of them. Each morning started with a demonstration of their current skills and a warm-up before taking 2 or sometimes 3 D ranks a day, ending with a lunch before Asuma set them on their paths for self-improvement. During their team training, Asuma found a jutsu for each of them to train in, and now was when all that training would come to fruition. Asuma smirked as he looked over his 3 students, the 4 ninjas standing in the center of their battered training grounds. Alright everyone, time for a check of your ninjutsu. He said around the sig in his mouth with a loud clap. The trio nodded as they looked at one another, but Shikamaru yawned as he began to walk away. I'll go first, he said lazily as had become his habit. After all, the earlier he started, the sooner he finished and could relax. As Shikamaru crossed the halfway mark of the field, he stood in a small circle that had been scratched into the ground. From here, okay? He asked loudly. Asuma nodded and ushered Naruto and Hinata into place, over double the distance of what Shikamaru's shadow techniques could usually reach. Do it, Naruto yelled excitedly. Shikamaru formed 3 quick hand seals before blowing into his closed fists. He pulled his lips away as he smirked. Fire style, flare, he announced as he calmly tossed what looked like a small ball of fire behind him. The ball hit the ground and exploded upwards in a bright light, not enough to really do much damage to anything, but its brightness temporarily blinded his targets as his shadow was magnified and made far more prominent. So before the light faded, Shikamaru made the rat seal, shadow possession. Shikamaru shouted. With his shadow already stretching further and being way darker than usual, it took little effort to not only grab one target, but both of his teammates. The flare died down, but their shadows were already connected so it didn't distort or break. Shikamaru smirked as he walked forward, causing Naruto and Hinata to come towards him. Asuma nodded. Good work Shikamaru. Alright, who wants to go next? He asked as Shikamaru let his technique drop. Naruto and Hinata looked between each other and he gestured her forward towards the river nearby. She nodded and began forming hand seals, finishing a few seconds later. Water style, water wall, she exclaimed. Water whipped out from the river, encircling her slowly before it shot up in a 10-meter tall wall for a few seconds, raining down and causing a circle around Hinata to form in the grass. I can hold it for nearly 10 seconds now, but I can't manipulate it yet, she said with a saddened look. Asuma patted her on the head. Great work Hinata, that's a B-rank jutsu for a reason, it's extremely difficult, he said with a cheeky grin as she looked at him with wide eyes. Sorry that I lied earlier saying it was easy to make you confident. It worked Hinata. You are a powerful water user now and wielder of the best defensive move on the team, he said with a smile towards the stunned Hyuga, and the next steps are S rank anyway, so I never expected you to get them while you're a genin. Asuma said casually. Hinata blinked in shock. I learned a B rank? Just like the advanced 8 trigrams techniques? She asked. Asuma grinned and nodded. Yep, good thinking. You should learn those too since you can knock over B ranks so easily. He said with a confident smile in her direction before turning to Naruto as the boy took a deep breath and crouched near the tree line. Now, let's see how he's managed. Asuma said softly. Hinata activated her Byakugan and Shikamaru glanced over at Naruto as the blonde took a few deep breaths. I got this. He muttered under his breath as he closed his eyes and clenched his fists. Naruto's claws slowly slid free from his left hand as his right hand formed a ram's seal to help focus, causing his claws to glow slightly with chakra before Naruto shifted his stance, wind style, wind-cutter. Naruto shouted as he slashed his claw through the air. 3-meter-long blades of wind flew out in a straight line, spinning through the air and cutting through the tree a few meters in front of him before they hesitated in the air, holding still for a few seconds before they dissipated into air. Naruto grinned in success as he turned to his sensei, seeing the Jonin clapping loudly with a smile. Very good, Naruto. I knew you'd get it if you had the right push. Asuma said, proud to have his student in wind chakra getting down one of Asuma's own trademark wind jutsu. Naruto couldn't hide the grin that stretched across his face. Well, you know what that means, sensei. Naruto exclaimed. Asuma blinked for a moment though before realization hit him. Oh yeah, I did say once you guys got these down I'd ask for a C rank, but I still have to check if you have cleared the minimum 50 D ranks. Asuma mumbled to himself. 47 missions, Shikamaru said with a frown. Oh man, that means we only got 1 or 2 days left before this C rank, what a drag. Shikamaru groaned. Asuma blinked. Huh? We really have done 47 D ranks already? He asked. Hinata and Shikamaru nodded while Naruto was counting on his fingers, though it was once again Shikamaru who spoke after a heavy sigh. Yeah, for the past 3 weeks we've been doing these stupid house chores. He complained. Hinata smiled softly at Shikamaru. Can we request specific missions? Maybe if we ask for some that are more adequate for our new skills, we can finish the last 3 tomorrow, she said, her voice lifting at the end as if she was asking permission. Asuma nodded with a grin. Yeah, good thinking, Hinata. Tell ya what. Let's call it an end early today and I'll go sift through the missions to find the ones we want most, he said before smiling over the laziest member of his team, letting his gaze wander across all 3 of his students with a smile. You know, as a sensei I didn't think I'd have to work too much, but I guess you guys make it fun. He said with a supportive smile gracing his lips. I hope you guys realize what you've fully achieved as of today. These techniques were the first steps to fully mastering your own chakras and now I want each of you to learn something from home. Asuma said. That earned him a round of blank looks, though it was Shikamaru who frowned as he asked, so, I gotta do more shadow training with my clan? He asked, earning a nod in return. "K, I'll train with Dad." Shikamaru said with a slight smirk, knowing his father's training was easy enough. Naruto grinned. Alright, now I'll have Anko Nate teach me a clone technique. Naruto shouted energetically. Hinata smiled at her teammates before her smile fell slightly. I doubt father will want to stop in Hanabi-chan's training. I don't want to slow her growth. Hinata thought with a slight frown. Asuma quickly scanned the 3 of them with his eyes, noticing Hinata's reluctance for home training and making him sigh. Damn, I thought they'd all want training at home. Less work for me after all. Maybe if I find out why she's hesitant. He thought to himself with a nod. Alright Naruto, Shikamaru, I'll come pick you guys up each around 7 tomorrow, so be out the front waiting, alright? We're gonna go straight to the missions and get them done. Asuma said as he stepped up to Hinata, placing a hand on her shoulder to hold her back for a moment. Shikamaru just nodded and turned to leave. 7? Oh man, what a drag. He whined as he walked away. Naruto nodded with a grin. 7 got it sensei. He said, his grin turning to Hinata. CYA tomorrow Hinata. Naruto exclaimed happily as he turned away. Hinata raised her hand in a wave. Bye Naruto-kun, she said softly, though he seemed to hear as he waved over his shoulder to her. Asuma smiled as he noticed Hinata watching the 2 boys walk away, the smile that sat on her lips seeming oddly sad. That made Asuma's smile fall. Asuma didn't consider himself a genius by any stretch of the imagination, but his bingo book name was Wind Guardian of Konoha, for his place amongst the fire temple guards when he was actually the head tactician. So he was apparently smart, but he knew there was always more to know. Like why going home always made Hinata seem sad. "Hinata," Asuma began, making the timid girl turn to him as her sadness disappeared behind her usual timid and tired look. "I realize that I know a lot about you now, but I don't know your family. Can we talk about them?" he asked softly, not wanting to pry while seeing how she'd react. To his surprise, she shook her head. Sorry Asuma-sensei, but father tells me not to speak of the clan to anyone." She apologized. Asuma openly laughed, causing her to look up at him in shock. "Hinata, you are the clan heiress. I think you are allowed to discuss with your sensei just little things about your family. I don't want to know any secrets." Asuma explained kindly. Hinata nodded slowly as she looked down again. Okay," she said, still feeling unsure. Asuma nodded as he began to walk Hinata back to the Hyuga clan compound. "Great, so, you mentioned your father? What's he like?" Asuma asked, already having his own opinion on the seemingly emotionless clan head. Hinata was just quiet as she continued to stare at the ground, causing Asuma to walk on in silence as a confident seriousness came over him. Asuma casually lit another cigarette as he followed Hinata from a half-step behind. "I'll just come talk to him myself then," Asuma thought confidently as he adjusted his outfit slightly. It was a few more minutes of silence where Asuma just enjoyed his smoke as he thought of the challenging situation ahead.
That's all for now. If you enjoy this video, then please like, share and do comments.